Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. It's time for Fight Night Picks with your hosts, Frey and Matt Allen.
And just like that, we're back and ready for UFC Fight Night Edwards versus Muhammad. Matt, I could not be more excited for this card. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. You can find me at Craig Allen FNP on Twitter and Instagram. With me, as always, Matt Allen. You can find him there at Matt Allen FNP on the socials. And Matt, we had a great weekend last weekend. I mean, UFC 259 question mark kicks with the fight companion, setting it up this week with UFC Fight Night, Muhammad versus Edwards. Edwards versus Muhammad, a fight that really a couple of weeks ago we probably weren't expecting, and for poor Leon Edwards, this just continues. I mean, saga of fight being booked, main event being booked, things falling out. He's supposed to take on Tyron Woodley last year. That fell out. Chimaev booked, and rebooked. And you can see it in the thumbnail for this video. We got Chimaev hanging out ominously in the background. Really a presence in this fight, even though he's not fighting. And for Belal Muhammad, a huge step up in competition. Just a few weeks ago, taking on Diego Lima and outstriking the striker. I mean, it was a great performance for Belal Muhammad, and Leon Edwards looking to get back at it. His last time out was a very long time ago with a decision win over Rafael dos Anjos. But Matt, overall, what a great card we have coming up this weekend.
Really excited for the card this weekend. And it's just nice to see Leon Edwards back in the cage. He's been in the top 5 for so long, and really he's been in the top 5 due to the fact that he has been inactive. And you know how good his skill set is. We just haven't really seen him up against the elite of the division yet. Yes, he fought Usman, but that was way back before either guy really knew who either of them were. But we've seen the developments in the striking and the grappling of Leon Edwards. And now you just look at this super well-rounded mixed martial artist. And on the other side, Belal Muhammad, what more can you say? There's not a lot of fighters who can lose and completely recreate themselves, and Belal Muhammad's one of those guys. You know how good his wrestling is, you know how good his jiu-jitsu is, but lately he has shown the improvements in his striking, and he does seem like a guy who's going to be in the top 15 of welterweight for a very long time. So a really good main event this weekend, and there's a ton of other great fights on this card.
I mean, overall, what an awesome card. We're going to preview every single fight in great detail, but Matt, let's throw it on over to our fight of the night screen, as always presented by Manscaped. When we're talking possible fight of the night, we have to give an ode to a fellow Canadian and fellow Maritimer, and I say that, they bill him out of Halifax, originally just an Atlantic Canadian at heart, coming out of Newfoundland. We have Gavin Tucker. And Matt, for Gavin Tucker, it's been a whirlwind last calendar year. I mean, this is a guy that was relatively inactive until recently, a guy that we came to know and love out of his UFC debut against Sam Sicilian, a fight where a lot of people scratch their heads, Maritimers included, watching him on a main card, take on a guy that fans knew and kind of loved. I know we're going to talk about Doo Ho Choi, not on this card, but there's a lot of Doo Ho Choi threads on this card, especially with Canadians. But when I look at this, Gavin Tucker came in and fought Sam Sicilia, looked amazing, and fought Rick Glenn, and the wind was totally out of his sails. Now he's taking on a guy in Dan Ige, representing Extreme Couture in Vegas, that's coming off a main event spot. So it's crazy for Gavin Tucker to just see this career progression where he lost that one fight so handily. He's continued to climb his way back up. His performances have been great of late. Originally booked to take on Cub Swanson. That fight not coming to fruition. But again, you get a guy in Dan Ige that we've had in the UFC for a number of years. Really, Tucker debuted sooner. He's the older fighter, but he's really more considered a prospect in this sense, where you're taking on a guy in Dan Ige, lost his UFC debut to Julio Arce, since then put on a very nice streak, fought Calvin Kattar, didn't look all that great.
Listen, you're going to lose to Calvin Kattar in a 5-round main event. That's just going to happen to the best of us. But Dan Ige, a really well-rounded mixed martial artist, and the same thing can be said for Gavin Tucker. Both guys are just good everywhere. So no matter where this fight takes place, it's going to be very evenly matched too. And for Gavin Tucker, time is ticking. He is 34 years old, even though, like you said, he is kind of the prospect in this matchup. He's the guy trying to make the bigger name for himself, whereas Dan Ige, he's already fought the Edson Barbosas of the world. He's had his main event. He's trying to keep his spot in the top 15, and a guy like that is always dangerous. So I'm so excited for this fight.
Love this fight. Again, stylistically, it's awesome. You can't wait to see the possible scrambles in this one. Gavin Tucker coming out of that southpaw stance. Definitely a possible fight of the night. Let's throw it over to another Canadian southpaw in another possible fight of the night. We're very much a Canadian show. I mean, you can't see it now because we're not on the screen, but I've got the maple leaf on my sweater. But normally we're pretty harsh against the Canadians. It's got to be said. I mean, we normally go pretty hard on the white and red. But if you look at this fight, we have Marcelo Rojo making his UFC debut. Originally supposed to be taking on Raoni Barcelos just last month. Barcelos out of that fight due to COVID. But if you look at this matchup, Rojo, normally a bantamweight, his last time out weighed in at 139, so there's going to be some question marks there, but he's coming in at featherweight, taking on Belal, Quebec, Canada's Charles Jourdain. His nickname is Air. This guy gets it. Both of these guys, great strikers. Jourdain, that long southpaw stance, really likes to rip the body with his kicks. He'll throw it up top. He'll throw some spinning stuff. The thing that I love about this, though, we've seen Marcelo Rojo, when he gets in close with a lot of fighters, he'll start attacking with knees. Charles Jourdain also loves to throw the knees and flying knees at that. Both of these guys, experienced strikers, subpar wrestlers. I was going to say terrible wrestlers, but I didn't want to be too harsh. They're not great wrestlers, and they're not great with their backs to the mat. I don't think we're going to have to worry about that.
No, I don't either. This is one of those classic knock 'em down, drag 'em out brawls, because you have two guys who, yes, they're very high-level strikers, but they're also quite hittable as well. You've seen Rojo, if you go back and watch his fights, he can get dropped, and the same thing can be said for Jourdain. But the big thing is they recover, and they come back even stronger in their fights. So this is going to be one of those classic, we're going to get a knockdown, and then the fight really starts from there. So I could not be more excited about the return of Charles Jourdain. And it will be interesting to see, where does Rojo stack up in the UFC? Because we've seen him outside in Kape. He's won against some good guys. He's lost against some good guys. So it will be interesting to see him against an elevated level of competition.
It's going to be great. And I mean, for Marcelo Rojo coming into this fight, his last time out was about 1 year and 4 months ago against Victor Madrigal, where he looked amazing, and that was probably his best win. If you look at the record, a little solid here and there for Jourdain. He was taking on names that you know and love now. He fought Laramie back with TKO. He lost that fight. And so far in the UFC, lost one up a weight class against Des Green. He was able to get the win over Doo Ho Choi that a lot of people remember him for in Korea as well. Lost by split decision to Andre Fili, and then had the draws last time out against Josh Kulibau in a fight that it was close, but it wasn't. We'll talk about that in the prediction video, but love this as a possible fight of the night, and it is a striker's paradise. What a card it is. I mean, Edwards Muhammad in that main event slot. The co-main event, another Canadian. Oh boy, we got Misha Cirkunov taking on Ryan Spann. We talked about the Canadians as possible fight of the night. Matt, the fight on the night screen wouldn't be possible without our presenting sponsor. It's Manscaped. Head on over to the website, manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. COVID spring break is right around the corner. You know what that means. Spring break in your pants. Matt, if you head on over there, they have some awesome stuff. So if you help support our sponsors, you're supporting the boys as well. And you can also find us at fightnightpicks.com, the website. Not a lot of people are checking it out, but you should, because we have the in-depth betting guides. We've got the merch. You can get the Under Armour Fight Night Picks hat, the Under Armour Fight Night Picks t-shirt. There's all kinds of great stuff over there. We're always looking to add to the team over there too. So if you think that you can bring something special to Fight Night Picks, maybe you want to do some written stuff, some interviews, make sure you hit us up at the socials, at Craig Allen FNP, Matt Allen FNP, and at Fight Night Picks on social media. Matt, I could not be more excited for this card. It's an awesome little fight night with some fighters that are really some Fight Night Picks favorites. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Really looking forward to this fight on the card. It is, of course, at welterweight. We have the Vanilla Gorilla. He's kind of dropped the nickname, but it's still there, and it's not Chase Sherman. We got Jason Witt making his third appearance with the UFC, taking on Matt the Jedi Semelsberger. And Matt, I remember when we were getting ready for Matt Semelsberger's UFC debut, he's taking on Carlton Minus. I went out on a limb and said, whoa, don't see why this guy is such an underdog. At the time that we started the video, he was a plus 225. We posted it, the line crept down a little bit more. And by fight night, he was like a minus 105. Still an underdog, but very much, an even money fight when he took on Carlton Minus. And you go back and watch the way that fight took place. And yes, Carlton Minus in the third round had a little bit of success. Semelsberger's hands started to come down a little bit. But man, did Matt Semelsberger ever look good in that UFC debut? And that was the thing. I went back and watched so much tape on him. And you look at some of the fights that he had coming into the UFC, and you could kind of say, well, geez, coming into the UFC, he had a win in 2020 against a guy that was 8-5, and Richard Patashnak. It was a good win. It was right up against the cage. He throws a nice elbow, finishes him off. It was great. 4-2 before that, a split decision win, 2-0 back in 2019. Like, the record didn't really tell you a whole lot, and you might not have loved it. You went back and watched the performances. Matt Semelsberger, what does he do very well? Has tons of power on the feet, doesn't throw a lot of volume, it's more single shots, and his takedown defense isn't that great. I mean, Matt Semelsberger kind of wrapped up into an easy ball to understand if there is one. Training at a crazy 88 MMA. But Matt Semelsberger, what do I know about him? Well, from that Carlton Minus fight, we actually saw a lot of progression from some of his other fights. And he's a very aggressive fighter. He throws very good combos on the feet. I really do love the fact that he switches stances, and we'll get back to that a little bit later on. But I do like it for him in a lot of his fights. And for his takedown defense, might not be all that great. Takedown offense isn't too bad, but the trouble is when he gets guys down, positionally, not really the best. Carlton Minus was able to get out of some really bad positions. There was a spot where Semelsberger had the back of Minus, and he was trying to kind of get on top of him so he could hammer away. And in the process, Minus just pops back up to his feet. And we saw Minus fighting Christos Giagos where, hey, Carlton Minus pretty good at getting up to his feet against just about anybody. And for Semelsberger, tired out a little bit. For Giagos, tired out big time. But he took that fight on very short notice. So for Semelsberger, love the power. The thing that I really like about his striking, he was throwing in combination in the Minus fight, where maybe we didn't see that as much in some of his regional tape. But I love the fact that he rips the left hook to the body, and he can kind of fake the left hook, go with his right hand, and then come up with the uppercut from his lead left hand. Love those combinations. I love the power and the fact that he backs up his opponents. But so does Jason Witt. And Jason Witt kind of does a lot of the same things. But the thing that I really love about Jason Witt in general is that when the striking isn't working, his wrestling works to perfection. And Matt, I know, and this is where I'll leave it to you, in his last fight, he took on less than stellar competition in Cole Williams, who missed weight big time, who missed weight in his last fight out. Like, Cole Williams probably didn't have any business being in there, but Jason Witt looked amazing in his last fight.
He really did. And you talk about the aggressiveness of Matheus Semelsberger. It's something that Jason Witt can go out there and be a really aggressive fighter himself. But when he does face that kind of pressure, he is a phenomenal wrestler. And that's the thing that Jason Witt always has in his back pocket. He will stand and trade with you, maybe a little bit too much sometimes, but he does have that get out of jail free card in his wrestling. And the great thing about Jason Witt's wrestling is he can do single legs, he can do double legs, and he's a good chain wrestler against the cage too. There is a few positions where he's not great in. Sometimes people can get back up to their feet, and he is much more position over submission. It's not like Jason Witt's going out there like Charles Oliveira, gonna float into mount and then choke it with a head and arm choke. He is very heavy on top, but I do like the ground and pound that Jason Witt implores. And the great thing about Witt too, if he does get on top of his opponent, he's great at tiring them out. He's not just gonna stay on top and let them kind of rest while they're on bottom position. He's constantly going from full guard to half guard to side control and making his opponent work in every single area of the fight. We saw that in the Cole Williams fight. Like you had said, Cole Williams didn't even look like he belonged to be in that fight, but Jason Witt's strategy was, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to tire him out, and then when the submission opens up, that's when I'll take my opportunity. And he really enacted that game plan to perfection. But against a guy like Cole Williams, I think other guys in the UFC could probably recreate what Jason Witt was able to do. And with Matheus Semelsberger, we talked about the Carlton Minus win. It's a good win, but I do feel like both guys were quite a bit better than their last wins. It'll be really interesting to see how they match up, because if Semelsberger's moving forward, landing shots to the body and to the leg, we might actually see Witt tire out as the fight progresses. And if Witt's going for a lot of takedowns like he can do sometimes, and if they're all being defended, we're going to see him be forced into a primary striker. And it's not that he's a bad striker by any means. He does have good power, but you talk about the combos that Semelsberger has. Jason Witt does not have those combos. He is very single shot heavy, and when the single shot lands, it's great, but I'm much more comfortable with Semelsberger on the feet than I would be with Jason Witt in this fight.
Neither one of these guys are cardio kings, and you're going to see it wane as the fight goes on. Now, again, for Witt, in the second round, he was able to get Williams down as he did in the first. In the first, he opened up a nasty cut with an elbow right on top of Cole Williams' eye. In the second round, he just kind of had to fish for that right position to get that arm triangle in, and it was a great submission win for him. You could see, even when he almost got into position, you could see that the hand of Williams was out and almost ready to tap, and Witt was able to kind of get into it, take his time, and he was able to get the win that way. And for Jason Witt, the thing that really scares me is if you go back and look through his overall record. Well, he took the fight against Takashi Sato on 48 hours notice. Sato just kind of hits him. It was almost just a straight punch that just kind of landed, knocked him down. He gets kind of back up or almost gets his wits about him. Sato's able to finish that fight very quickly, 48 seconds into it. You look at the rest of his career, finished by Hugh Pulley, that was back in 2018. Finished by Justin Patterson, 2017. Dakota Cochran choked him out. Jeremiah Denson finished him. Chance Rencounter finished him. Jason Witt's been finished in his losses by submission, but a lot of them by knockout, which kind of does scare me, especially in a firefight against Matt Semelsberger. Like I said, very, very good with his hands. His cardio's not terrible, but in the third round when he's taken on minus, the corner implored him. You're losing the fight between the second and third. You got to go out there with volume. At the start of the fight, tons of volume put on by Carl minus. Semelsberger kind of goes back and forth. It was a close third round, a lot closer than the first round or even the second round. But it kind of worries me a little bit as the fight goes on. You know, he's got his hands down low. He's still throwing kicks out there, and he's throwing spinning kicks in the dying seconds of the third round. But still something that I want to watch out for. The other thing that I had to talk about, back when we did the original video for Semelsberger coming into the UFC, huge deep dive on that, regional scene. The guy spent 4 years as strong safety at Marist College. He weighed 225 pounds when he was a strong safety. Dang. So when John Anik said that, because, had done the research on the football, didn't really care about what he weighed. 225 when he was a strong safety, he's fighting at 170. So I thought, well, how much does the average strong safety weigh? I thought, how much did the best strong safety weigh in the UFC? Troy Polamalu weighed 207. Ed Reed weighed 205. Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, back, 10, 15 years ago, the greatest strong safeties out there. Matt Semelsberger pulling in at 225 trying to tackle guys. That's insane. Again, I like the hand speed. I like everything that Semelsberger does on the feet. Witt, powerful striker, but usually just a closed distance to take guys down. So, if I was looking at this one, Semelsberger can more than capably knock out Jason Witt. Jason Witt can more than comfortably take down Matt Semelsberger. I would think, if we're just taking it for what it's worth. I went over and looked at the Tapology votes. It's still early, 767 of them, 57% Witt, and you've got a strong contingent, 73% by decision, 43% Semelsberger, 56% going with a decision, 37% have him to win by knockout. I threw away my notes with the odds map, but Semelsberger opened a plus 106 underdog. He's now minus 134 favorite. Witt opened the minus 127 or thereabouts on best fight odds as a favorite. He's now a plus 109. So the money's coming in on Semelsberger. The fans are almost split. How do you see this one?
I am going to slightly side with the Tapology fans and ever so slightly pick Jason Witt for the reason that you brought up. I do like his wrestling, and I do like the fact that he can close distance with strikes. Now, he does have to watch out for the up-the-middle strikes like the uppercuts and the knees of Semelsberger, but if you're Witt and you can take down Semelsberger at least 2 times, I think he can hold that position and try to drain some of the energy out from Semelsberger. And if Witt is the one on top, just draining his cardio, by the third round, Witt should be the much fresher fighter if it does last that long. So I'm personally going to side with Jason Witt in this fight.
Jason Witt, a little bit shorter. The reach is kind of close. You'd have to expect Matt Semelsberger coming in there, the bigger fighter. But for me, again, I just like the wrestling edge in this fight. I think Semelsberger has great straight shots. And again, would not be surprised in the least if you get a knee up the middle, if you get one of those nice uppercuts like I mentioned, usually used in combination. But if Witt's coming in, you can more than certainly throw one just to kind of deter him a little bit. Semelsberger has a good gauge of distance. And the other thing that Semelsberger does very, very well, he cuts off the cage wall. He doesn't chase too much. He cuts it pretty well. But again, the takedown defense, while it has improved over the length of his career, I do worry about it a little bit. I ever so slightly edge as well. Gloria MMA and Fitness, Jason Witt in this one. So we're going with the underdog. We're going with Jason Witt to get the win. But it should be a close fight. And if anything for me, it is a pop and popcorn fight. So Matt, listen, I'm really looking forward to this one. Yeah. It's a great card. And we have welterweights kicking it off. And welterweights in the main event. Leon Edwards making the return, taking on the bully. Remember the name, Belal Muhammad. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big time fight in one of the busiest divisions in women's MMA. We have Jinh Frey taking on Gloria de Paula, who's making her UFC debut. Really exciting stuff coming out of Shoot the Box Diego Lima. And we've been talking about that gym more and more often. I mean, of course, you have Charles Oliveira up near the top of the ladder at lightweight. You also have women's flyweight in Maeda Bueno Silva, who bears a close connection to Gloria de Paula. The two of them are girlfriends, and I think that's awesome to have somebody like that in your corner. I mean, we talk about fighters that have a relationship like that. We have JP Bays and Cheyenne Bays on the same card coming up here, next week already? Yeah. You have, Amanda Nunes last weekend, and a really good fighter in Nina Ansarov, who has a big fight coming up in her own respect. But for Gloria de Paula to have a fighter like that, Maida Buena Silva, who has great stand-up, a really, really slick jiu-jitsu, to really complement Gloria de Paula, who's mainly a striker. She has great Muay Thai, a really good clinch game, really great knees up there, throws well in combination with some really cracking leg kicks. Taking on Jinh Frey, who, if you look at Jinh Frey, I mean, what can I say? She has really, really heavy strikes. She has a sneaky ground game where her takedown defense for Jinh Frey might not be all that good, but her jiu-jitsu can be quite sneaky. So for me, it's a really tricky fight. And if you look at Jinh Frey's total record, I mean, Matt, we talked about this in the past, but the losses and even some of the wins against great competition. I mean, for Jinh Frey in the UFC, she's lost her last two. Loma Lookboonmee, Muay Thai artist, and Kay Hansen, huge up-and-comer. You look at the other losses, though. Ayaka Hamasaki, women's GOAT. Seo Hee Ham, women's GOAT. It's just unfortunate that for her, when she was in the UFC, A, took on a high-level competition, B, she's an atomweight, and Ayaka Hamasaki as well. So for Jinh Frey, I look at this, atomweight champ 2 times over with Invicta. It hasn't worked out at the UFC at strawweight. I gotta say this right off the hop. This is a tough ask for Jinh Frey, late in her career up at strawweight. So what do you think here?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Jinh Frey is going to have a very hard time in this fight because of the size disadvantage that she's going to have. And for someone like Gloria de Paula, who has such great Muay Thai, she's going to give Frey a really big trouble on the feet. And if Paula gets you backed up against the cage, she does 2 things that I really like. She throws in combination, and she is good at cutting off the cage. She's not just someone who is going to follow her opponent around in circles, like we see a lot and that Joe Rogan will get on people for and never stop hounding them. But she is good at using her feet to cut off her opponent and not just trying to throw hands to try to do it. And it's something that normally you only see when you do get into ranked fighters, but it's just a nice little wrinkle that she has in her game already. And for Frey, here's the thing. She isn't fighting in her proper weight class. She's a small atomweight, if we're being honest, and the fact that she's being forced to fight up at 115 pounds is going to be a very tough ask. And when she is fighting people who are the size of a woman like Gloria de Paula, she's going to have a really tough time, especially in the wrestling and the grappling departments, because Frey is a good striker. I wouldn't say she's a phenomenal striker. She has good power. She will throw combinations. But the fact that she is such a small fighter for this weight class, well, yeah, you've got good power at 105 pounds. But then you think of fighters who have fought at 115. Rose Namajunas, it's pretty hard. Jessica Andrade, it's hard. Like Joanna, these are the types of fighters who we're talking about at 115. And it's just really tough envisioning Jinh Frey moving her way up the rankings all that high at this weight class. You saw what Kay Hansen was able to do to her on the ground. And a lot of what that fight came down to was the fact that Kay Hansen, the much bigger fighter out of the two, and she was able to wear on Jinh Frey when the fight did hit the mat. You could tell that the size of Kate Hansen was wearing on her, and by the time the 3rd round came around, she was able to lock in that really nice triangle choke. So for Frey, I just don't really know where I can put her ceiling in the UFC. I think she does have a great excuse. Listen, I'm not in my proper weight class. She could go back to Invicta, probably have some great wins at 105 pounds. But for her at this stage of her career, she is, 35, 36 years old. It's not that she's on the 18th hole of her career, but she's definitely on the back 9. And fighting someone like Gloria de Paula, who, not that she's the next big star by any means, but she's a good young prospect who is well-rounded, who does have that good Muay Thai. It's just a really hard ask for Jinh Frey.
And I mean, you look at it. So you've got a fighter in Gloria de Paula making her UFC debut off of a great win on Dana White's Contender Series against a good fighter where, all right, de Paula coming into this one, you're 25. You're 5'5" to 5'3". You've got a longer reach than Jinh Frey. Listen, if you just go stats off a page, but you watch the fights, and Gloria de Paula has that instinct where she's always pushing forward. Again, I talked about the knees in the clinch, but you look at her last fight against Pauline Macias, and in that fight, I mean, her opponent, Pauline, judo background, judo black belt, had trained with Ronda Rousey, was training at a Factory X, so you'd think maybe even some of the striking's coming together as well. Pauline did a great job early on. First takedown, I mean, listen, to her credit, Gloria kind of got out of it a little bit, but Pauline just throws her to the mat. And then Gloria works her way back. And for the last 2 minutes and 50 seconds of that fight, Gloria's just trying to cinch a little bit of a choke. She pulls into it. Kind of a boring chain of events for 2 minutes and 50 seconds out of a round, but enough to really A, seal it for her, but B, tell you that even if she gets taken down, she's going to keep working at it. Second round, defends the takedowns, works in some of her striking, invests in the body with her knees. By the 3rd round, it's all Gloria, enough to really win Dana White over to earn that contract. And I look at some of the losses on her record. Isabella de Padua by decision a couple of years ago, and Ariane Carnelosi. Well, they're both in the UFC. So, I mean, yes, it might not be the same level of competition as Jinh Frey, because Jinh Frey was fighting some of the best fighters in the world. And even though Frey was losing some of those fights, I still think that it matters that she does have that level of competition. But when I look at the odds, Matt, Frey opened a plus 111 over on Best Fight Odds. She's now a plus 137. For Gloria de Paula, open a minus 133, now at a minus 167. Really hard for me not to go with the Brazilian fighter in this one.
It's de Paula's fight to lose. It really is. And it's kind of unfortunate that the UFC is using Jinh Frey's, I guess, former champion status against her in this fight, but she has been up against the Kay Hansons of the world, who they try to build a name off of Frey with, and it feels like they're very much doing the same thing with Gloria in this fight. I expect Gloria de Paula to win this one with little difficulty.
Matt, both of us going with Gloria de Paula. Hey, maybe Jinh Frey catches her with a power shot on the way in. You never know, but we're going with the Brazilian in this fight. Really looking forward to this card, Matt. Our co-main event, Ryan Spann taking on Misha Cirkunov, and in the main event, Khamzat Chimaev watching from a perch. You have Leon Edwards taking on Belal Muhammad. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big time banger at bantamweight. We have a guy who, listen, I'm sure Brennan and Dale would love his nickname. You have to call me Dragon. Jonathan Martinez taking on Davey, who still should be in the Navy. Grant. And Matt, for Davey Grant, a guy that's represented Bishop Auckland and SBG Bishop Auckland for a while, he's coming in here on a nice 2-fight heater. And you look at the wins, a split decision win over Grigory Popov, who didn't look all that good in the UFC, a little long in the tooth for a prospect, but his last time out, he took on Martin Day. Martin Day was a big favorite in that fight. We all took Martin Day. Who didn't take Martin Day? Davey Grant didn't take Martin Day. Davey Grant probably did the Tim Elliott and put like a cool amount of money on himself to win, because Davey went in there and in that third round knocked Martin Day's lights out. And he looked amazing. Like, Davey Grant looked really good, and we've known Davey as a guy that's 10-4 right now. Majority of his wins by submission. He's got that slippery, slick ground game. But his hands really came together. And the other thing for Davey Grant that we've seen as his career's gone on, he's had long layoffs. Oddly enough, has improved. And by the time that he took some of these fights recently, I remember, he fought Manny Bermudez. He lost quickly. And then he took quite a bit of time off, about a year. And I thought, oh, he's still in the UFC? Oh, we're fighting Grigory Popov? And then he beats him. And then they match him up with Louis Smoke, and the fight doesn't happen, and he gets Martin Day. But you look at some of these losses, he came in off the Ultimate Fighter Season 18. He loses to Chris Holdsworth. I mean, I wish Chris Holdsworth didn't get hurt and we get to see more of him.
Would have been nice.
Then he comes out and he fights Marlon Vera. Yes, that Marlon Vera. And he beats him by decision in 2016. Still developing Marlon Vera, but a nice name to have on the mantle. Loses Damian Stasiak by finish. Loses to Manny Bermudez by finish, but that was like golden heyday of the Bermudez triangle, and he finished him by triangle. And then again, the 2 wins. And for Jonathan Martinez, this is where it gets really tricky, Matt. We saw Jonathan Martinez come in. Well, I saw his debut, and I interviewed him. And at media day and at the little media scrums, because he was supposed to fight, and he did fight, Andrei Sukumtov, Martinez comes out, hands in his pocket, really soft. Didn't really say a lot, just little interviews. And I remember watching, getting ready for that week, watching Jonathan Martinez interviews. I think he did an interview with James Lynch. I can't remember which publication it was with at the time. But it was like, yeah, I'm in the UFC now. I'm Jonathan Martinez. It's Dragon time. Watch over the fire. No, he didn't say anything cool like that. He was just very subdued. He goes in there and fights Andrei Sukumtov. Listen, and the other thing, too, you had fights for Martinez at 25, coming in at 35, loses a decision to Andrei Sukumtov, who was all that in a bowl of cereal that week in terms of media. It was really weird, but he was also coming off of his Sean O'Malley loss. So Jonathan Martinez loses to Sukumtov. He goes in and fights Luigi Beren. He's a slight favorite. He wins that. Then he fights Liu Pingyuan. Step up in competition. Finishes him in impressive fashion. Fights Andre Ewell. Loses split decision. Should have won that fight. He should have won that. Fights a poor and depleted Frankie Saenz. That fight didn't make sense. The other thing that didn't make sense, Jonathan Martinez missed bantamweight and weighed in at 140.5. So then in his last fight, and I'm going to cap it here and I'll let you take over, he fights Thomas Almeida. It's at 145 pounds. So you got a glass cannon in Thomas Almeida, from what we had seen, and he had a long layoff, taking on Jonathan Martinez at 45. Martinez weighed in at 146. Weight's been an issue. We're fighting Davey Grant at bantamweight. I hope this weight cut goes well, but for Jonathan Martinez, could realistically be on a 5-fight win streak and has looked good in those 5 fights.
I really do think he deserves to be on a 5-fight win streak. And really, if you look at those 5 wins all put together, Andre Ewell's a great win to have in your career, and so is Thomas Almeida. And having 2 wins like that does kind of justify fighting someone in the top 15. And I'm not saying Davey Grant isn't deserving of this opportunity, but to me, it was a little odd when this fight was announced. You have Jonathan Martinez, who... he didn't just beat Thomas Almeida, and I do think this is an important distinction to make. You can knock out Thomas Almeida. It's not that hard to do at 135. But at 145, we saw a very crisp striking Thomas Almeida, and the fact that Jonathan Martinez outstruck him for the full 15 minutes, I think you will learn a little bit more from that than if he just went out there and starched him with 1 shot. And the great thing about that fight was Martinez rocked him in every single round. And the thing I love about Jonathan Martinez, he's much more of a Michael Bisping striker than he is a Vanderlei Silva striker, where, yes, he has TKOs on his career, but he's not going out there putting everything behind every shot. He's a very measured striker, and he's very accurate with the shot selection. And the other thing I like about Martinez, he's very active with his back power kick to the point where he throws his kick just to prevent you from throwing punches. For a guy to not be ranked and only be 26 years of age, that's a really high fight IQ thing to be doing for someone like him this early on in his career. And really, the only question mark I have in this fight is, can Jonathan Martinez make the weight? Because personally, I think he should be able to win this. Let's be honest. I think Jonathan Martinez is going to be in the top 15 of either 135 or 145, whether he can get his weight together or whether he can't. I really do. I think that's the kind of talent that we're talking about. The issue has been the scale for him, though, and we've heard this before. Kelvin Gastelum, another guy, all the talent in the world. Manny Bermudez isn't that good, though, so let's stop bringing him up when we talk about top-tier fighters. But I do think Jonathan Martinez is a guy who's going to be able to finish a lot of guys in the top 15. And Davey Grant, he's got the wrestling, he has the grappling, but we've seen Martinez. The thing I like from him is he's a great example of someone who can defend the takedowns before his opponent even touches him. He's got that wide stance. He's got really great footwork, too. And I do love his knees coming up the middle. We talked about this with... Gabriel Benitez when he fought Justin James, the fact that every time James is going to crash into you, he's so fast with his reflexes on those knees and those middle attacks, and Jonathan Martinez can do a lot of that same stuff from that southpaw position. I think there will be areas for Davey Grant to take advantage of, you know, maybe some of the takedown defense of Martinez. He might be able to get him down up against the cage, but Martinez, great at getting back up to his feet. He's a great long-distance striker. For me, I just think this is kind of strange matchmaking, honestly. The fact that Martinez probably should be on a 5-fight win streak, you would assume he'd be getting ready for those guys in that top 20 to maybe 10 range. And now he's fighting Davey Grant, who, yes, has looked better recently, but I don't think Davey Grant could go out there and knock out Martinez like he did to Martin Day. And Martin Day, it was a nice win, it was a good performance, but it's not like Martin Day had the best UFC career either. So I look at what Davey Grant could do to Jonathan Martinez, and I just don't see a lot of areas that he can take advantage of.
To me, here's what I'm thinking. For me personally, I'd maybe wait, see what the first round looks like. Because for Jonathan Martinez, I know, you know, you make jokes at his expense, and he's a reserved guy. And listen, I'm fine with that. He seems like a really polite, nice kid.
He does.
And I say kid.
He's older than you.
He's a little bit older than I am. He's shorter. Maybe that's why. It could be a thing like that. It's like a Dana White power thing. But I look at it, Jonathan Martinez, I mean, he's got all the striking acumen in the world. He has decent takedown defense. And you look at Davey Grant. Maybe you like the sub prop on Davey Grant. Maybe that's the thing. I don't really like him to win by knockout. Not really so much by decision, because I like the volume out of Jonathan Martinez. And the thing is, I mean, you look at Tapology, 814 total votes, 87% Martinez, 63% by decision. If I pull out my handy-dandy notes and I look at the odds, you got one of the bigger favorites on the card in Martinez, who opened a minus 182 average on best fight odds, now minus 316. And if you look over at Grant, open plus 151, now at a plus 245. So I'm in agreement in here with you as well. I mean, Davey Grant has all of the tools, a little long in the tooth. Maybe he gets it done. It's almost like comparing the last fight that we had. I mean, Jinh Frey taking on Gloria de Paula. Way younger, much better striker, different ways to get it done. I like Martinez in this one.
Oh, I agree 100%. I honestly do. I think the ceiling for Martinez is really high. I do. If he can get his weight together, I love the cardio. I like the volume. And I think we are dealing with, and this is high praise, but we could be dealing with a Kyler Phillips type fighter who, yes, he didn't get his UFC career off to the best start, but you look at the improvements that he's been able to make, and you just look at his skill set. There is something special there for Martinez, and I think he'll be able to show it off Saturday.
To me, waiting until question mark kicks. I want to see what this looks like on the scale on Friday, but I will go with Jonathan Martinez. Martinez. Not enough for me to put it on my card just because of the weight issues so far. So I'm not going to hit that line this early. I'm going to consider it popping popcorn for now, but I am going Martinez.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Really looking forward to this fight. In this fight card, Matt, we get a great main event. You have the man himself, Belal Muhammad, stepping into a huge opportunity to take on England's Leon Edwards. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. If we're calling a fight a possible fight of the night, you know you got to tune in. And we have a Canadian out of Belal, Quebec, Canada in Jourdain. And he's taking on one tough Argentinian in El Pitbull, Marcelo Rojo. And Matt, we went back and watched a ton of tape on Marcelo Rojo. And it was originally for his fight against Raoni Barcelos that didn't happen. I mean, Barcelos, it would have been a short notice replacement for Rojo coming in there. Barcelos out due to COVID. Rojo was holding out for UFC contract. He hasn't fought in some time. The last time we saw him in the octagon was a year and 4 months ago. But it wasn't an octagon. It was a cage, and it was circular with Combate. And Rojo got the biggest win of his career over Victor Madrigal. And if you go back and watch that fight, amazing. Full extension overhand right that knocks Madrigal back on the cage. Big win, but I went back and I looked at how good Victor Madrigal was or could have been, and some decent level of competition. So I throw a lot of credit Rojo's way. He's taking on the Canadian striker here, the southpaw that you know and love, in Charles Jourdain, a guy who was last time out he had a draw against Joshua Culibao. Before that, a loss by split decision to Andre Fili, the man himself. Before that, a knockout win over Doo Ho Choi in Korea. That was a huge win. And his debut was a loss up a weight class on somewhat a short notice to Des Green. It's going to happen. For Charles Jourdain, wrestling's his kryptonite. Desmond Green beat him. So you look at Jourdain, throws a whipping kick from the backside with his left leg. He throws a lot of spin attacks, great knees up the middle. I mean, what can I say? He's a great striker. For Marcelo Rojo, wow. This guy's a good striker. I think that the line on this is absolutely out to lunch. I think it's way too steep because for Marcelo Rojo, well, what does he do well? Some of the things that Charles does, I mean, he moves forward great. He pumps out the double jab. He whips out a nice leg kick. He throws good combinations. He's got a nice knee up the middle. And he does have a laser and dynamite right hand. And yes, he went full extension against Madrigal. But if you want to go back and watch some good fights, even in his fight against John Castaneda, who has a propensity to get backed up until he cracks. Look at the fight against Eddie Wineland. But in the fight, Rojo did a good job of whipping that cross out there. He was doing a good job. The straight right, the right cross, whatever he needs to do. Rojo is an all-action fighter. I love this matchup, Matt. Stylistically, it's great. But again, I have an issue with this line because I'm surprised it's so overwhelmingly Jourdain. I think there's still that residual shine off the Doo Ho Choi fight. Because in that Culibao fight, he was a huge favorite. He drew, but it was tight.
Listen, I think the line is where it should be. Let's be honest. Charles Jourdain should have beat Andre Fili, who I hold in very high regard. I think Andre Fili is that perfect. He's your 22nd best, but probably 22nd worst featherweight on the roster. He really is just kind of the average across the board. He's very good at everything, but he doesn't really excel at anything. And the fact that Jourdain, I understand it's a loss on his record by split decision, but he took the fight to Andre Fili in that one. He really put it after him. He was very aggressive in that fight, and he was able to drop Fili. So when you're talking about fight of the nights, I do think you have to look towards this fight. We're dealing with two very heavy-handed strikers who, I think we can say this very comfortably, neither one of them have very good striking defense. It's not difficult to find the chin of Charles Jourdain, and you can find the chin of Marcelo Rojo as well. The difference is Charles Jourdain has all those really good southpaw attacks, and that's going to be very important in this fight because Marcelo, although he is traditionally an orthodox fighter, he will get the southpaw look, and what I really like from Rojo is he uses his right hand kind of like he uses his left hand. He will still throw the double jab out of the southpaw position, but he won't stay in southpaw for a very long time. He really only switches stances to throw something, give his opponent a different look, and he's right back into orthodox. The issue with that orthodox stance is when you're facing a guy like Charles Jourdain, who does have that really nice power kick, he doesn't go to the head a lot with it. He loves sneaking it under that elbow and going to the body with it. And we've seen Rojo get hurt to the body before in his career. And the fact that Jourdain, he's really good with that body kick, but he's also great at using his calf kick to set up his punches later on in a fight. Now, You talk about the wrestling of Jourdain and the fact that it is his kryptonite. Wrestling's both guys' kryptonite, and that's what makes this a really, really fun fight, because you're going to deal with the fast, lightning-fast striker of Rojo versus the more powerful Charles Jourdain. So it will be an interesting fight, and the real key to this fight for Rojo is he's going to have to move his feet. If he stands in the pocket with a guy like Charles Jourdain, we know how heavy his hands are. He's not afraid to go to the body. He's not afraid to go to the head. And I understand his last two performances, they might not be the most impressive, but both still show that if he catches you clean on the chin, you are going to go down. So I am excited for this fight as I am for any other one.
If you go back and watch Charles Jourdain's last performance, he should have beaten Josh Culibao. I know there are people that were very, not upset, but very opinionated in the comment section after his fight. He was more than a 4-1 favorite to beat Culibao, and he scraped by with a majority draw. I mean, it was what? 30-27 for Jourdain, 29-28 Culibao, 28-28. It was a close fight. It was way too close of a fight than you'd like to see against a relatively unproven guy in Culibao. And listen, I get it. People in the comment section at the time, well, Culibao trains with Volkanovski. Cool. Marcelo Rojo is trained out of Gym Entram or Entram Gym with some of the best fighters in the world. Namely, Brandon Moreno is one of those guys that trains out of that gym. And for Rojo, he's been off for a while. Again, he was pining for a UFC opportunity. His last time out, they call it a catchweight bout, but his opponent weighed, what, 135 3/4? He weighed 139.2. So I think moving up to featherweight, not going to be a huge issue for him. Again, it's been a year and 4 months, so he's going to take whatever fight he can get. Originally, the Barcelos fight on short notice. Now you get Charles Jourdain. It's a tricky one. I mean, you look at Jourdain, out of all of his wins, they're all by finish, 7 by knockout, 3 by submission. For Rojo, 16 wins. He's got, what, 8 by knockout, 6 by submission, 1 by DQ. When he fought Javier Orarzbal, it's a very difficult name to pronounce, but, well, that was an illegal bite. So you can't bite your opponent. He won that one by DQ. But again, nice pressure, good right hand, good kicks. Listen, if you want to see a commentary team get excited about a nickname,
oh my goodness,
go watch his fight against John Castaneda. I think that's the most fun I've ever had watching a fight.
John el Sexy Mexi Castañeda!
But it's really tricky. And the other thing is, you look at Marcelo Rojo, and the way that Combate kind of pushed him, it was always as a jiu-jitsu fighter. He'll implement his submissions. He also has the celly of nightmares. I've never seen a guy T-Rex so creepily after fights.
Go, go! La victoria de Marcelo Rojo!
It seems to be something that he picked up later on in his career, but it's straight up weird.
I like it a lot, I gotta be honest.
I don't ever need to see it, but again, I can't stress this enough. The confidence level in this pick's difficult because you look at Jourdain, he was a 4-1 favorite in a fight that he should have won. He did not perform all that great. He was in the States, he was living with his girlfriend, there were all sorts of things around it going into the fight. From what I've seen on the social medias, he's been training at a Brazilian top team in Quebec, so hopefully, again, background, familiar surroundings. You go down to the States, you come back, you do your 2 weeks of quarantine, and c'est la vie en français au Québec. But I do have a tough time because Rojo throws a lot of volume, he has a lot of power, and he can give Jourdain a lot of problems. Neither one of these guys has good wrestling defense. It's bad. That's why this is a fight of the night. So if we look at the Topology votes as a bit of a decider, 86% of 753 going with Jourdain. 56% by decision. You got 32% by knockout. The 14% that went Rojo. 42% by decision. 49% by knockout. Again, the odds on this fight, Matt. If we look on best fight odds, minus 225 for Jourdain open. Minus 261 average right now. For Rojo, open a plus 190. He's roughly around a plus 208. There could be value in the Rojo. I have a tough time with one thing, and you mentioned it. When he's coming in from orthodox, his hands are either down a lot, where he's susceptible to a high kick, or he brings them up high when he's starting to close. Jourdain throws a lot of knees, he throws a lot of those kicks, and that body is wide open. And I think if he invests in them early, we've seen Jourdain. Can he fight at a labored pace? It's kind of weird, but I think if he invests in the body early, he could get a win. I'm a little worried on this.
And Jourdain does have good cardio. I know he does fight at kind of a strange pace, but it's not like he falls off a cliff in the third round by any means. And for a power puncher, we do see guys start to fade, but even go back to the Culibao fight, Jourdain's third round is by far his best. He 10-8's Culibao in that. So I do think that Charles Jourdain is going to win this fight. I like the body shots, and I like his counter left hand too. For Rojo, he's going to have to out-volume Jourdain to win this fight. I don't think he can stand in the pocket and try to sit down on a shot because every second he is trying to plant his feet and throw with power, power. He's going to be met with power, and I don't think that's a game he's going to win in this. So I like Jourdain. I don't know if he's going to win by stoppage, but I do think this is absolutely fight of the night. You don't have two guys that only have one decision win between the two of them not fighting to a fight of the night.
Matt, we had so much fun going back and watching Rojo's tape on this one. I have to tell you about a fun fight. You come back to Fight Night Picks, you like, you subscribe, you do what you need to do. The Jesse Strader fight, listen, 3-0 fighter. It was 2 years ago, so you don't love that. It's a little sketchy on the record. Holy smokes, those guys threw down. They went right straight to the body and then right back up to the head with knees. It was amazing. It's an awesome one to go back and see. But an all-action pairing. I'm ever so slightly going with the Canadian in this one, but I don't have a ton of confidence in it. You're going with Quebec's Charles Jourdain as well, so on va voir ce qui se passe, but we'll see. We're both going with Jourdain this one. Really looking forward to the fight. It should be a great one. An awesome card headlined by the man himself, Belal Muhammad. 13 fighting, 3. He's taking on Leon Edwards. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.
And if you're new to Fight Night Picks, welcome. First of all, at Craig Allen FNP. You can find me there on Twitter and Instagram, Matt Allen. You can find him likewise at Matt Allen FNP on the socials. And listen, if this is your first time, A, we appreciate you, but B, we've been doing this thing for just about 3 years now. So Fight Night Picks in its 3rd session. And there's a guy that one of us has been incredibly high on since, well, forever. And that's Rani Yahya. And Matt, I'm that guy. I've been high on Rani Yahya for just the oddest reason. To me, he's like a pocket-sized Damian Maia. You can just fit him in your pocket. It's 1A, 1B. Only Rani has this weird Muay Thai background. And if you ever watch him fight, especially in his last fight out, looked absolutely amazing on the feet against Enrique Barzola in a fight that, listen, did he lose the fight? Yeah, I mean, he didn't win the fight, but if you look at Rani in the way that he fights, I mean, he comes out like a phoenix rising with his head totally on the center line, but he does strike, and he will kind of come forward. He'll throw flying knees. He'll throw a few kicks here and there, and he'll start to land in combination with his hands. But if you look at this guy, one of the slickest jiu-jitsu practitioners in this entire world. I mean, a former longtime WEC vet, fought on the very last WEC card, WEC 48 back in 2010, made his UFC debut against ATT coach, and I cannot stress this enough, Mike Brown, beat him by decision. And you go through Rani Yahya's record. I mean, we're talking big names. He finished Josh Grisby. You know, the guy that was supposed to fight Jose Aldo for the title. Well, he finished Josh Grisby by north-south choke. Like, he has so many submission wins. He's truly like a small Maia, a small Alexei Oleinik, only he has better hands than Alexei Oleinik. You might not have heard of him because maybe you're not perusing the prelims, but you stumbled upon a channel that is very pro Rani Yahya. I have to get the bias out of the way now because this is a guy, again, like I said, we've been following him for a long time. Lately, since 2014, he's got submission wins over Johnny Bedford, Matthew Lopez, Henry Briones, Russell Doan, Luke Sanders, that one by heel hook, the loss to Ricky Simone, the draw against Enrique Barzola. And Matt, in my notes, I wrote this one down because there's so many different things. 20 of Rani Yahya's wins are by submission by 12 different ways. How insane is that?
It's really, really impressive. And you talk about guys like Damian Maia, like Alexei Oleinik. They're great grapplers, but a lot of the time they know what submission they're looking for once they get the fight to the ground. Maia's always trying to get your back. Alexei Oleinik always going for those weird head and arm chokes, be it whether you're on top of him or he's on top of you. But for Rani, he can really get any submission from any different spot in the fight. And the thing I really like about Rani, and you compare him to Maia, they both do half guard sweeps very, very well. And honestly, here's the problem with Rani. His cardio falls off a cliff in that 3rd round.
It is some of the worst cardio you've ever seen in a 3rd round.
It really is. And some of that can be attributed to how aggressive he is in the first 2 rounds. And maybe if he took his foot off the gas a little bit, he might have a little bit more in the tank for the 3rd round. But you always have to talk about that when you're talking about a Rani Yahya fight because he will, like you said, comes out of the gate, guns blazing, likes to strike, maybe a little bit too much, but his bread and butter is on the ground. And even though he's not the best wrestler in the world, he's a very tricky grappler where, let's say you do stuff as initial takedown attempt, he will go into a deep half guard. He will try to sweep to your back. He's never going to stop grappling as long as he is in that close range. So you've always got to worry just about kind of your distance from the cage being your back to the cage and away from Rani when you're fighting him. Because if he is able to get you up against the cage, he's going to just continue to trip you, tire you out. And if he is able to get your back or find an arm, he is an absolute nightmare to deal with. But for Ray Rodriguez, it will be really interesting because Ray Rodriguez, obviously I would say the more powerful, striker out of these two. And it's nothing against the striking of Rani. I think he has very good striking for what we consider a jiu-jitsu ace. But the fact that he's a little too happy with his hands, and he does carry that chin very high up in the air. He's not like Luke Rockhold where, oh, you tap him, he goes stiff. But it's something you have to watch out for. And really, the Ricky-Simón fight did expose some of those holes in the striking and the gas tank of Rani, because if he could just defend a lot of his takedowns, keep the fight at range, although he is a good striker, he is somewhat simplistic in his approach. And if you're a guy like Ricky-Simón, who we get on him because maybe his striking's not as good as we would like it to be at this stage of his career.
Pretty good in his last fight.
Exactly. But he was able to go out there, defend the takedowns, and just do enough to get the win. I'm not saying Ray Rodriguez can recreate that game plan, but it is very realistic for Ray Rodriguez to go out there, defend a few takedowns, force this into a striking matchup. And if he can expose some of these striking deficiencies of Rani Yahya and the fact that he does carry his chin so high, Ray Rodriguez has a chance to win this fight.
And really, for Ray Rodriguez, haven't given him enough shine. So let's go by way of Texas here with the judge, Ray Rodriguez, a guy that made his UFC debut on short notice, taking on Brian Kelleher, losing in the first minute by submission in classic, well, really, Brian Kelleher fashion. If you go back and look at that one, it was by guillotine. He loves that choke. And for Ray Rodriguez, I mean, didn't really get a fair shake out of him. And this is a guy that people have known on the regional scene, especially in the LFAs and some of the smaller promotions in the States, for a very long time. He's faced a very high level of competition. If you look at it, out of his last number of fights, he beat Andy Perez over with Combate, lost to Tony Gravely on Contender Series. Well, that's going to happen. I mean, Draco Rodriguez lost to Tony Gravely with King of the Cage. You look at some of the wins. The really nice one, if you go back and watch Extreme Fight Night 356, he fought Jimmy Flick. Now, Jimmy Flick, you know and love him at 125. He's got, what, flying arm triangles? Like, the man's a wild man. But if you go back and watch that, it's an initial blitz in the second round where Rodriguez just pushes forward, jumps, has a jump knee, kind of follows it up against the cage. Flick kind of falls down, holds his eye, and that's it. Rodriguez picks up a big, big win. But again, the loss is Kelleher by, submission. You lose to a really tough out against Tony Gravely by ground and pound. The guy's an awesome wrestler for some of the lower weight classes. He got submitted by Chris Gutierrez back in 2018. Gutierrez, you know him for the leg kicks, but his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu is quite good unless you're Cody Durden at the start of a fight. But other than that, I mean, he's taken on a decent level of competition of guys that, again, you'd recognize on that lower regional scene. I mean, Steven Ocho Peterson, another one of those guys. So for Ray Rodriguez, the thing about him, a lot of wins by submission as well. And that's kind of the thing. I mean, you look at Rani Yahya, 11-4-1 in the UFC since he joined in 2011. And he's 10-6-1 at 135 pounds. This fight at 135, Ray Rodriguez's debut was up at featherweight. He's moving down to bantamweight. And again, with Rani Yahya, you look at the fight against Enrique Barzola. For me, Barzola is that perfect litmus test, whatever division he's going to end up fighting at, because he's a good wrestler, he's a pretty good striker, and he's fought a good level of competition, and there's no quitting on Enrique Barzola. You watch that fight, Yahya wins the first round, Yahya wins the second round, Barzola 10-8s him in the third.
Oh my goodness.
And that's the thing. I mean, I do worry about Rani Yahya and his cardio in a fight like this. Now, Ray Rodriguez, he's been finished in the past, he's been finished by submission, and you look at Yahya, he's that kind of grappler to the nth degree. He's that great black belt that you know and you love. But for me, I do worry. I mean, I do worry about, Yahya in a fight like this. And we talked about it. I mean, you talk about third round fights that Rani Yahya has lost or has really let him slip away from. I mean, geez, even the Joe Soto fight, like he had a bad third round, and that one was back in 2017. So I have a lot of question marks about Rani Yahya. Now, of course, he trains out of American Top Team with some of the best in the world. But I look at the odds in this one. Yahya open to -310. He's now -303. For Ray Rodriguez, open +260. He's now +239. If Rodriguez is able to have a fast start and work it with the hands and really kind of tire out Rani Yahya, he could be able to get a win. Rani's jiu-jitsu is at such a next level, he could play spoiler. I just don't love that line in this one.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the odds whatsoever, and it really does come down to the cardio of Rani, because let's say Ray Rodriguez is able to make Rani work hard in that first round, steals the first round. Well, Rani's obviously not going to win that third round, especially if he already had to work hard in the first. So just by playing MMA math, I guess not by comparing opponents, but just looking at the rounds, there's definitely a path to victory for Ray Rodriguez. But I do like the grappling of Yahya. I do like the fact that even if he does get that initial takedown attempt stuffed, he is going to continue to grapple and just never settle for a bad position. And if he is able to get on top for really any period of time, the fact that he can threaten with leg locks, with arm bars, he can threaten on his back, he's just so good on the ground that it is really hard to pick against Rani in this fight.
even in bad positions where you see his opponent on top of him. I mean, I know in his last fight against Barzoli, almost went for a Sulev stretch in that fight.
Exactly.
Got kind of bucked out of it. And if you look at Ray Rodriguez, overall, he's got a good record. I mean, look at it, 16-7 in total. You look at it at bantamweight, 6-4. So does he deplete himself to get there? We'll find out on Saturday night. But both of us going with Brazil's Rani Yahya to get the win. Really looking forward to this card, Matt. We have Misha Cirkunov taking on Ryan Spann in an all-action co-main event. And finally, Leon Edwards is fighting. He's taking on Belal Muhammad in the main event. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Really interesting fight at women's flyweight. We have cast iron Cortney Casey representing Arizona taking on JJ Aldrich out of Colorado. And Matt, both of these women coming out of really good gyms. I mean, we've seen it with JJ Aldrich, obviously the connection with Jakar close, but as far as the gyms in and around the Phoenix area, MMA labs, so on and so forth, fight ready as well. A lot of good training partners in that area. You look at it for JJ Aldrich, training out of Elevation and some of the associated gyms in Colorado. I know Shanna Dobson, one of the names that pops off the page, Mallory Martin as well. A little bit of a connection there with Polyana Viana between those two women. Maybe JJ Aldrich didn't get Mallory ready for that fight in time, but there's a lot of, pedigree, I should say, in the gym of both of these women. And for JJ Aldrich, you look at it in total, man, the UFC marketed her a lot. Like, she was on UFC 227, and not like the prelims or the early prelims. They made you pay for her fight at UFC 227. She was at UFC 246, not as a fan, but she was on the prelims of that card. Like, JJ Aldrich has had a little bit of a promotional bump. If you look at it, 3-2 in her last 5, you look at some of the wins. I mean, Danielle Taylor, Polyana Viana, she got knocked out by Macy Barber. She beat Lauren Mueller. She lost to Sabina Mazo by split decision. And if you go back and look at that, MMA decisions, really, the MMA media members weren't all that split. It had actually gone a lot in the favor of Aldrich. If you look at just the numbers on UFC stats, I mean, Mazo way outstruck Aldrich. But really, to me, it was the footwork, the pressure, and some of the combinations for Aldrich that made more of an impact. And even still, Mazo led in significant strikes, but it was Aldrich with the pressure that really kind of won a lot of people over in that one.
And that fight really proves that not all significant strikes are created equal, because Sabina Mazo, although she is a really good striker, there's not a ton of pop behind her shot. And I'm not here to tell you JJ Aldrich is going to start starching fools left, right, and center like she's Francis Ngannou, but when she does connect with shots, you can tell there's an effect behind it. She's a very heavy-handed striker for this division, and it is kind of unfortunate that a lot of people remember her for her loss to Macy Barber, because she does fight in a somewhat similar style to a Macy Barber, where she's going to go out there, she's a bit more of a brawler than she is a technician, has good takedown defense. The thing for Aldrich, though, is you can overwhelm her with volume, and I hate to use the example of Aljamain Sterling versus Petr Yan, but just hear me out for 2 seconds. When you do throw a lot, she will just keep her hands up, and she won't throw counters back. And you saw that a lot. When Aljo was throwing, it's not that he was landing every time, but when he was throwing, it was at least keeping Petr Yan from retaliating with his own shots. And you can keep JJ Aldrich somewhat off her front foot, just off her game, if you can throw a lot of volume. And Cortney Casey, her striking's odd, because in some fights, she can kind of follow that game plan, and she will throw a lot of punches. And then in other fights, look at the Felice Herrig fight, for instance, she just waits a lot. And if she is on her back foot and waiting for the fight to come to her, this is not the opponent to try to get away with that, because someone like Aldrich, she is going to be able to get on the inside at a certain point and land to the body and to the head. And for Cortney Casey, I think she does have some tools that can counter that offense and the aggressiveness from Aldrich. But physically, I do think Casey's going to struggle with someone like JJ Aldrich, who is the more physical fighter out of the two. And in my mind, I do think Cortney Casey's going to have to get a takedown at some point in this fight. I think she's more than capable of getting a takedown. She has really good trips from the clinch. She has a decent single leg as well. But in my mind, you've really got to try to mix things up. Because if the striking of Casey, if she is trying to be overconfident, if she is going to stand in the pocket with someone like Aldrich, again, I'm not here to predict a TKO by Aldrich, but you're definitely going to see the effects of the shots of Aldrich a lot more than you will from the ones of Casey.
Neither one of these women with the most overwhelming stats in the entire world. Striking accuracy for Casey. Normally, Fight Night Picks, we don't go too far into these numbers, but there's a decent enough sample size. For JJ Aldrich debuted against Juliana Lima, it's been a while, back in, 2016? Wow. Fought on The Ultimate Fighter Season 23, had a win over Christy Lopez, and a loss to Tatiana Suarez. And that's kind of the thing. For JJ Aldrich, it's been highs and lows, and some of the wins, maybe not the highest quality of opponent, would you say?
No, not at all. And it really is the story of two different careers, because Cortney Casey, she's kind of in the same boat. When she does fight the upper echelon, she doesn't always win. It's just Cortney Casey seems to always be in there with a top 10 opponent. And that's the crazy thing. if you are on the side that experience means a lot in the cage, and listen, it really does, Cortney Casey has the experience X factor going into this fight. And even look at some of the fights that she's lost in the past. I always think of the Michelle Waterson fight. It's always the first one that stands out. Michelle Waterson is an elite fighter in this division, even though, listen, I didn't think she beat Angela Hill, but she is a very good top 10 fighter. Cortney Casey gave her everything that she could handle in that fight, and she really threatened a lot with her jiu-jitsu in that fight, and that's why I think the takedown is going to be so important for her.
And if you look at, again, you want to go stats, Matt, I think this one's fair. Takedown average per 15 minutes, 0.31 for both of these women. Takedown accuracy for Casey, 30%, 25% for Aldrich. 37% takedown defense for Casey, 53% for Aldrich. So, again, JJ Aldrich, you might not think of her as a physical specimen or one of the bigger fighters in the division, but really, if you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, height-wise, pretty close. Reach-wise, pretty close. Casey moved up, of course, from strawweight to fight at flyweight. The flyweight bid's gone so-so. And you look at Casey's record, 9-8 so far in the UFC, 5-7. But if you look at the last 5, the Waterson split decision loss. She beat Angela Hill by split decision. She loses to Cynthia Calvillo by unanimous decision. She comes up, beats Mara Romero Borello by submission. Now, Romero Borello, listen, she's one of those fighters where it's either kill or be killed. We're submitting people, we're getting kicked out of Italy, or I'm going to get, submitted.
Yeah.
It worked out for Cortney Casey in that one, and then Casey fought a much better submission artist in Jillian Robertson and got submitted herself. So, and that was a weird fight too, but this is one of those things. Aldrich, we haven't seen her in a while, UFC 246. Again, she definitely is the better striker. It's been about a year. I'm sure she's really worked on that game plan. Again, training out of a great gym, elevation, we talked about it. Martin, Montana De La Rosa, Dobson, good friends with Ashley Yoder, who's also on this card. For Cortney Casey, long, rangy striker, usually keeps her head back. It'd be nice if maybe she threw a few more leg kicks, but you're going to see the more crisp striking out of Aldrich, and we're going to have to see what happens as far as the ground game's concerned. So let's talk about the odds really quick. You look at Cortney Casey, open to plus 145 underdog. She's now plus 124. For JJ Aldrich, open to minus 165, now at a minus 150. And Matt, let's pull up the Tapology votes for fun. 873 of them, 62% Aldrich. 93% by decision, 38% that have Casey, 83% by decision. So the fans are going with Aldrich. The money's on Aldrich. What are you thinking here?
I like Aldrich. I do. I'm not in love with the pick by any means, but I do think her physicality on the feet, her takedown defense, again, it's not elite by any means, but it's not like Cortney Casey, some Division I All-American. She has some good takedowns.
She used to be a soccer player.
Exactly. Very high-level athlete, but I do think JJ Aldrich will be able to win this fight. I see this being primarily a boxing fight. Like you said, the lack of kicks by Casey is going to keep her somewhat in range of Aldrich, and when Aldrich lands on Casey, you are going to see an effect. So I do like JJ Aldrich in this fight.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to try and figure out. Like I said, you got a 9-8 fighter that's had 12 fights in the UFC out of those 9-8, and you look at it. For Cortney Casey, in 2018, fought twice. Fought once in 2019. Fought twice in 2020. She was supposed to take on Priscilla Cachoeira back in October. Cachoeira couldn't make the weight. We did a prediction video for it. Cortney Casey's just continued to move forward, and I love it. And listen, you beat Mara Romero Borello. Okay, well, that's not the best. You lose to Jillian Robertson. All right, well, now we're kind of separating ourselves. So Casey's definitely, a 20 to 15 type of fighter in a not-so-deep division. JJ Aldrich definitely, has the more shine. We've seen her on the pay-per-view main card, so on and so forth. But I will ever so slightly edge Cortney Casey in this one. I think, again, if it gets down to the mat, Casey's really going to try and grind on JJ Aldrich. If she can tire her out, if she can really kind of land some shots from the bottom. Like, if we can see a game plan from Cortney Casey, and this is going to be a weird one, like we saw out of Yana Kunitskaya when she took on Ketlin Vieira. If you're just doing something, Cortney Casey can get the win here. She's the underdog. I'm going Casey. You're going Aldrich. Really interesting fight in an ever-evolving flyweight division. Really looking forward to this one. We've got a great card coming up, Matt. I couldn't be more excited for our co-main event. We have the Latvian Canadian, that is, Misha Cirkunov taking on Ryan Spann, and in our main event, Belal Muhammad taking on one really tough out in Leon Edwards. So, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Really interesting fight at middleweight, and I'm crossing my fingers this one's at middleweight, between a couple of 5-5 fighters. We have Eryk Anders taking on Darren Stewart, and I say 5-5 because they're both 5-5 in the UFC. Now, Darren Stewart has the no contest, the accidental headbutt in his debut against Francimar Barros that was deemed, of course, accidental, overturned to a no contest. Darren Stewart would go on to lose 3 fights. He was on the chopping block. And then he came back like a phoenix rising, and he's looked pretty good since. Now, for Darren Stewart, I got to get this out of the way. Normally, I kind of tiptoe and pitter-patter around some of these things. You look at the fights that he had since the 3-fight losing streak. So he lost to Barros in the rematch. He lost to Carl Roberson. He lost to Julian Marquez. Very fun fight if you want to go back and watch that one. Beats Eric Spicely. Beats Charles Bird. Loses split decision to Edmund Shabazian. Probably should have won it. Beats Bavon Lewis, looks good. Beats Jourdain Win by split decision. He beat him. He beat him. Loses to Bartosz Fabinski 2020. Beats Maki Pitolo, loses split decision to Kevin Holland. The one real blemish that I have on Darren Stewart's record, because I look at this, all right, those 3 losses in a row, and they kind of ended in 2017, I forget about them a little bit. You know, I kind of forget about them, because he's looked good since against varying levels of competition. The problem I have, so they were supposed to have UFC London. That was going to be Woodley and Leon Edwards. And then the card got shifted around due to COVID. The one fight that they saved off that card, and they put it on Cage Warriors 113, was Darren Stewart, Bartosz Fabinski. They put it in the main event. Paddy Pimblett was on that card. We did previews for that. And we were so high on Darren Stewart to beat Bartosz. Because what does Bartosz do? Has great judo, poor cardio. Darren Stewart, pretty good wrestler, pretty good submissions, pretty good striker. Like, he's decent all around, and his cardio is not terrible. Bartosz Fabinski mopped the effing floor with that guy. And Bartosz, not the biggest guy for middleweight. Like, really, he's kind of a blown-up welterweight.
He is.
What middleweight is? But really, he's a blown-up welterweight. So I worry about that fight a lot. Now, he came back. He had the fight against Maki Pitolo and looked amazing. Was it a little bit too much too soon for Pitolo? I don't know. But Darren Stewart looked pretty good. And then he fought Kevin Holland in a fight where, listen, Holland won the first 2 rounds. I know it was a split. Holland won the first 2, and Stewart ended strong in the 3rd round.
Did.
So for me, you look at that fight, Darren Stewart, all right, so be it. Weight, not really the biggest issue. I said that from the jump, and I crossed my fingers. Eryk Anders was supposed to fight back in November. Weighed in at 187.5 to fight Antonio Arroyo. So high on Eryk Anders in that fight. People called us donkeys. So high on him. So he weighs in, misses weight. They do the face-offs. And then the next day, Eryk Anders off the card. Weight cutting issues after the fact, so on and so forth. And he had to be taken to the hospital. Now, was it all that bad? Probably not. Have I gone on Instagram and looked at Eryk Anders? He looks Shred City, and he looks in really good shape coming into this one. Pictures from the last week. But man, the weight's been an issue before, and the trouble is with Eryk Anders, you know, he's had fights at 205. The Santos fight was on short notice, and he got absolutely steamrolled. But after that, he fought Khalil Roundtree in 2019. Well, he got steamrolled by Bangkok-ready Khalil. Then he fought Vinicius Moreira, arguably one of the worst fighters we've ever seen in the UFC, and he knocks him out in the first round, moves back to 85, beats Gerald Meerschaert by split, and loses to Christoph Jotko in a fight where, yeah, Eryk Anders had the control time, but every time that fight was on the feet, Jotko teed off.
And that's the real thing with Eryk Anders. He's a good grappler, but he thinks he's a striker, and we talk about this a lot. People who know what they're good at. I don't think Eryk Anders knows what he's good at. I think he has all the tools to beat someone like Darren Stewart. I just don't think he realizes he has all the tools to beat someone like Darren Stewart. Because Eryk Anders, we talk about the striking. He has good power. He's a tricky southpaw. He's got decent boxing. He's good on the ground, though, and he actually competes in jiu-jitsu tournaments all the time. It's more of what he focuses his time on than his actual striking training.
Eryk Anders has a purple belt. Eryk Anders has a brown belt. Darren Stewart has a purple belt. Eryk Anders, leveling up.
Exactly, and you would think that would be as easy as path to victory in this fight. We've seen Darren Stewart struggle with grapplers, and Eryk Anders is going to be the bigger fighter in this fight. You talk about the weight misses. He's a guy who fought at 205 and was a fairly big light heavyweight. It's kind of wild to me that he even wants to fight at 185, to be completely honest, because I do think that we do see a diminished version of Eryk Anders down at the weight class. And Darren Stewart, if Eryk Anders tries to fight Darren Stewart like he fought Christoph Jotko, where it is very control heavy, very clinch heavy, he might be able to eke out a decision. But the issue is, and I think it's an issue that we've been starting to see after the Thiago Santos fight, he's not that comfortable on his feet, and you can out-volume a guy like Eryk Anders. He does have that really high stance, and if you're a guy like Khalil Roundtree, who we saw throw those big looping shots around his guard, you can connect on Eryk Anders' chin, and Darren Stewart has absurd hand speed and really good power, and I would argue his boxing technique, at least, is far better than Khalil Roundtree's. He's a guy who does go to the body, he's a guy who goes to the head, he's got good elbows on the inside, too. That's one thing I like about Darren Stewart. He makes guys pay for their takedown attempts. We saw that a lot in the Jourdain Win fight, because Win, he went for 1,000 takedown attempts in that fight, and that fight really was a story of Win went for a bunch of takedown attempts, didn't really do anything with them, but when the fight was on the feet, Darren Stewart was teeing off
Just
on him.
like when Darren Win fought Antonio Hoyo.
Exactly, it's really a story for old Darren Win, but I do like the game of Darren Stewart, especially against a guy like Eryk Anders, because Anders is there to be hit, and he's not the best wrestler in the world. If he is able to get the fight to the mat, then yes, he can get some effective ground and pound and a little bit of grappling off. But in my mind, if Darren Stewart can defend a few takedowns early on, I think he's got better cardio than Eryk Anders. I think he's got better boxing technique than Eryk Anders. And if Eryk Anders finds himself in one of those slugfests in the middle of the cage, I can see him getting dropped sooner rather than later.
Matt, wow. I mean, Eryk Anders, he switched things up. He's trained out of Fight Ready MMA in Arizona. And I think that's a good camp change. I mean, he's been a guy out of SBG, and really most of his career he's been out of SBG. And now he's really made that camp switch here lately. I think it's a good move for him. So we'll see how that plays out for Anders. Like you said, I mean, he has good wrestling. If you look at the stats, we had a decent enough sample size for both of these guys. Great takedown defense from Eryk Anders. He can really kind of force the fight wherever it needs to be. You want a great Eryk Anders fight, go watch him fight Tim Williams. Pride Never Die. If you want to see a kick like that. It was insane. I have a tough time with this one. Again, the weight's a bit of an issue for me. Darren Stewart, as odd as it might sound, a little bit more of a consistent fighter. But if you like Eryk Anders, you love that Bartosz-Fabinski fight. If you like Darren Stewart, you like the Marky Patolo fight. So there's a tale of two different fighters. To me, this one's a bit of a tricky one. 1,011 votes on Tapology. 77% going with Stewart, 74% by decision. If we look at the odds for this one, Anders opened a plus 162. He's now plus 150. For Darren Stewart, open to minus 196. He's now minus 182. So the money's on Stewart. The fans are with Stewart. I have a bit of a tough time with this one. I will ever so slightly go with Darren Stewart here.
I just think he's the more active striker out of the two. And again, I know I kind of made it sound like he'd be able to clip Anders with something big and maybe drop him, but just his overall work rate is a little bit higher. And Eryk Anders is a guy who can kind of be caught looking in the mirror where he's not the one initiating a lot of the offense, he's just reacting to it. And if you're on the back foot against Darren Stewart, he's going to land something big eventually. And Eryk Anders has little to no head movement. And the good thing about Darren Stewart is he does do a good job of at least peekabooing in and out, and he can catch you with a hook on the way in. So I like Darren Stewart in this fight.
Matt, both of us going with England's the dentist, Darren Stewart. Really looking forward to this fight, and it's a great card. Cirkunov, Spann in the co-main event, and in the main event, we're talking Leon Edwards and Belal Muhammad. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big time banger at flyweight. We have the return of Matheus Nicolau taking on my guy, Starboy Manel Kape. And Matt, we were so excited for Manel Kape's UFC debut. And you talk about somebody fighting in a mirror. I mean, it was like fighting in a house of mirrors. Manel Kape just didn't engage. I mean, he fought Alexandre Pantoja his last time out, and I pumped Kape's tires. I pumped them so hard, and he came out and just didn't do a whole lot. So it was really kind of worrisome, especially in a fight like this against Matheus Nicolau, the type of guy that will really push a pace. And I'm not saying Matheus Nicolau is a fighter like Pantoja. He's very one-dimensional when you compare him to Pantoja. I mean, if you look at Matheus Nicolau, awesome takedown defense, very, very good striker. For Manel Kape, decent takedown defense, but he's primarily known as a great boxer. And the thing for me that I was a little bit worried about with Manel Kape, okay, he's trained out of AKA Thailand for a long time. He has really, really good footwork, really defensive fighter. Like, if you talk about strikers, you like Jourdain for the fact that he can go all defense and then all offense. Manel Kape's one of those guys. He can kind of stand there, play the defensive game, and when he needs to turn it on, he's got that crisp footwork. If you like, and this is a terrible example, but if you watch the Triller fights, now this was a card with Nate Robinson and one of the Paul brothers. If you watch Mike Tyson when he fought Roy Jones, this is a classic Mike Tyson thing where he'd do that kind of skip, and he just kind of skip on you. And if you want a really good Manel Kape fight, if you want to go back and watch the fight where he took on an aging Takeya Mitsugaki, he did exactly that, and he looked amazing. He will switch stances very well. He can work great from southpaw. He can work great from orthodox. He can mix in those sneaky little kicks. But the one kick that I don't like from Manel Kape is he does this kind of like, oh, I'm going to flip a soccer ball behind me, and I'll kick out his back leg to try and kick your front leg. It's the silliest thing ever. He did it once in the Pantoja fight. I stood there and shook my head. But overall, you look at the work rate of Kape in most of his fights, especially over in Ryzen, the former champ over there, where he took on a decent level of competition. I mean, you look at the losses, Matt. Kyoji Horiguchi, Kai Asakura by split decision, Oka Sasaki, former UFC vet, wins over Yusaku Nakamura, Seiichiro Ito, Takeya Mitsugaki, and again, Kaya Sakura, where he finished him. Then he kind of held out for a UFC contract, had a fight booked against Rogerio Bontorin last summer. Bontorin, ankle injury, probably would have been a winnable fight for Manel. Then he fought Alessandro Pantoja in a fight that was rebooked a couple of times and gave us nothing. Matt, that's a lowdown on Manel Kape, and I think we did a crazy job of going in depth in his debut against Alessandro Pantoja. So I'll link that video down below if you want to have a more in-depth look at Manel Kape. But a great boxer, pretty good takedown defense, very, very fast hands, good defensively. You're taking on Matheus Nicolau that, listen, he lost to Dustin Ortiz. He went 3-1 in the UFC, with the loss being the last fight. He got knocked out by Dustin Ortiz. Crazy head kick.
Not a good sign.
But the UFC decided to cut Matheus Nicolau. They cut him in the same cuts as, who was it, Hector Sandoval and Brandon Moreno. Everybody was surprised at the time. Nicolau takes some time away, wins a couple fights. Now he's coming back into the UFC. Now, wins against competition that you might know and love. That's kind of the thing. Alain Gabriel over with Future FC finished him, and he beat Felipe Efrain over with Brave CF. Pretty good wins. He was originally supposed to be taking on Tagir Ulanbekov in this fight. Kape coming in on short notice. He stayed in Vegas since his last fight, kind of fight ready, if you will, training with the guys that have AKA in the States, the Makachev, the Javier Mendez, and Habib. So I'm really interested in this fight. What can you tell me about Matheus Nicolau, a guy that's been away for a little bit of time and served a tiny little USADA suspension before the fight, well, really before the fight against Elise Smolka?
So, Matheus Nicolau is a really, really fun fighter to watch. He does have a style kind of similar to a Santiago Ponzinibbio, where he's a really wide, orthodox striker, really likes using his back leg, and he's got great calf kicks, too. And the thing I like about Nicolau is he's not afraid to switch stances, but he is a fighter who suffers a lot defensively when he does switch stances. Kevin Lee's always the fighter who I think of when this comes up, because Kevin Lee, he's a great orthodox striker. He should probably just stand orthodox, but he isn't that kind of new school mentality of, oh, I've got to switch stances. But when he is in his southpaw stance, you can tell he's a much more hittable fighter. Nicolau does kind of share that similarity with him, where he is a little bit more hittable out of his southpaw stance, although I will admit he doesn't show it as much as a guy like Kevin Lee does. But it is a nice look to give his opponents, because he's not a guy who's very kick heavy, and normally when you see guys switch stances, especially when they go southpaw heavy, they like using that back left power leg to try to target out the liver. But for Nicolau, it's more just to get his punches in and out of range. It's to turn his jab into his power hand, and when he's throwing a combination, he is really good at going to the body and to the head. But again, for Nicolau, there's so many defensive lapses that he has in his game. He's a very hittable fighter, and that's what makes this fight really fun. Offensively, Matheus Nicolau is an absolute handful to deal with. There's a lot of artillery coming your way when you're fighting a guy like Nicolau. But for Kape, when he fought Pantoja, here's the thing. I think Pantoja is one of the elite in the division. I really do. And I think all he needs is one, maybe two more wins. We will see that Figueiredo rematch in the future. And you say Kape's your boy. I think you're too hard on your boy for losing to one of the best fighters in the division, because he looked hesitant against Pantoja. But I think Pantoja is just that kind of a fighter. You can't really let your hands go against him, because there is the threat of a takedown, because he is so good on the ground. And you really don't want to just let your hands fly, because you know how much of a power puncher he is. So I think this is a great rebound fight for Kape, because it allows him to face another top-tier striker, but it gets rid of some of those variables that Pantoja brought into the cage. He isn't going to have to worry about the grand game as much with Nicolau. He isn't going to have to worry about the wrestling as much, and I do think that will allow Kape to really show his striking in this fight.
And I mean, I talked about the fact that Manel Kape, he has decent kicks this night. He didn't throw a ton of them, but really didn't throw a ton of anything in the fight against Pantoja. And the other thing, too, he was at least kind of mixing in some of the takedowns. Didn't do a lot with them, but he was at least kind of threatening them, which, again, bit of a head-scratcher when you're taking on Alessandro Pantoja. Against Matheus Nicolau, you know, we talked about it. The guy has really, really good takedown defense in the UFC, and that's something that you're not going to have to worry about. 100% takedown defense in 4 fights. He had a win over the former title challenger, John Moraga, a guy that you don't hear enough about these days. If I look at the odds for this one, I'm not overly surprised. Again, you had a fighter in Matheus Nicolau that was originally supposed to be taking on Tagir Ulanbekov. Honestly, and I'm not even joking, I would have picked Nicolau to beat Tagir Ulanbekov. Yeah. I didn't think Ulanbekov looked very good at all in his debut against maybe lesser competition. I mean, compared to Manel Kape when he took on Pantoja. So that's just me. I look at this one, the odds, Matt. Yeah, I mean, Kape open to minus 115, now minus 149. For Matheus Nicolau, open to minus 115, now a plus 123 or thereabouts. And if we have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt, might be a bit of a surprise. 863 of them, 79% Kape, 67% by knockout. I'm taking Manel Kape to win by decision. But Matheus Nicolau is a great opportunity in this one.
Matheus Nicolau is one of the few power threats in this division where if he catches you with the right shot, you're going to go down. I don't care who you are. Look at the Louis Smolka fight. He drops him 3 times. And
in the first round.
And he cracks him clean throughout that fight. And he does have pretty good cardio, too. He's not just a power puncher who's going to blow himself out in that first round going for the finish. He can keep that power late into the fight. So I do think there's an opportunity for Nicolau to win this fight, but I do like the speed of Kape. This is my issue. People remember him for that Kaya Sakura KO. That's not the fighter you're going to get in the UFC every single time out. That is him at his absolute best. You have to remember, he also lost to Ulka Sasaki. Ulka Sasaki was a flyweight who got cut before it was cool to cut flyweights. So there's quite a few question marks out there for Kape, but I do think getting a win over Nicolau is going to prove a lot.
No wrestling shoes. Maybe it means something in the UFC. Maybe a cage is different than a ring. Just ask Fedor. Matt, we're both going with... Yikes. My guy, Manel Kape, to get the win. And let's see what happens in this one. Let us know down below in the comments section who you're going with. I'm really looking forward to this fight. Our main event's great. Our co-main event's great. It's a really interesting card. Let's keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big time fight at women's strawweight. We have Overkill Angela Hill taking on the Spider Monkey, Ashley Yoder. Now, Matt, this fight was scrapped on the day of the fight, not that long ago, because somebody in the camp of Ashley Yoder tested positive for COVID-19. We did an in-depth breakdown only a few weeks ago. I don't know if we're thinking any differently on the pick. You'll have to wait until the end of this, but if you want to know everything about this fight that you ever needed to know, well, let's get into it. It is an odd fight. At the same time, for Ashley Yoder, Matt, this is a fighter that a lot of people, us included, probably had written off. I mean, going into her last fight, she was 7-6 on a 2-fight losing streak, taking on Miranda Granger, who only had 1 loss at the time. Granger was 7-1. And I remember saying, Miranda Granger's going to outstrike Ashley Yoder. Ashley Yoder's pretty good on the ground, has decent jiu-jitsu, has pretty good striking. Ashley Yoder put on a clinic in that fight. And I know that one of the judges had a 10-8 in that fight for her, and kudos, because I thought she did have a 10-8 round in that one as well. She looked amazing against Miranda Granger, who, in a lot of circumstances, is a long-rangey striker and a lot taller than a lot of the fighters in this division. And again, props to her, she looked great. In their original booking, Angela Hill had the decision win. She had a great start to the year. She fought just about every other weekend. And if you look at her last 5, she knocked out Ariane Carnelosi. That's probably the most yoked up fighter that you're going to find in the UFC. She finished Hannah Cifers at home. Like, that was a North Carolina fight. She got a win there. She out Muay Thai'd Loma Lookboonmee, which was kind of crazy. And then she lost a close split decision to Claudia Gadelha. And then she lost a close split decision to Michelle Waterson. Now you're fighting 8-6 Ashley Yoder. It's been a weird time for Angela Hill.
It really has been, and I don't know if you're going to get mad at me giving my prediction away this early, but let's be honest, Angela Hill's going to win this fight. Like, I thought Angela Hill arguably beat Michelle Waterson, and she probably should have beat Claudia as well. And her last fight was a main event against Michelle Waterson. And here's the thing, Ashley Yoder, I'll be honest, I never thought that she'd have this long, illustrious UFC career, and not really that she has, but she's been around for a lot longer than I thought she would. And I do remember maybe we had referenced Miranda Granger as Ashley Yoder 2.0, not our best hot take of all time, but Yoder has made improvements throughout her UFC career. That's something I can't take away from her. She used to not be able to defend takedowns at all, and now she can keep the fight on the feet. And really, if she wants to go for the takedowns herself, that was really the story of the Granger fight. She dominated her on the mat. But this is my issue. Ashley Yoder on the feet is still a very hittable fighter, and her striking's not very dynamic. She is very boxing-oriented. She will throw the odd kick here and there, but you're asking Ashley Yoder to basically go out there and outstrike Angela Hill. Because, yes, Yoder's ground game's gotten better, but Angela Hill's fought in far better grapplers than Ashley Yoder and hasn't had trouble with them in the past. Even look, Claudia Gadelha is one of the better black belts in this division, and Angela Hill defended her takedown attempts, and it was really just a kickboxing fight that I thought Hill should have won. So Yoder's going to have to try to beat Angela Hill at her own game. And you just brought up Loma Lookboonmee. Loma Lookboonmee is a ridiculous striker and a very good MMA Muay Thai practitioner. And I just don't think Ashley Yoder's going to be able to outstrike Angela Hill in this fight. I hate to give the prediction away so early, but for me, it's Angela Hill's the better wrestler. If she gets top position on Ashley Yoder, I doubt Yoder can reverse it. If it's just on the feet the whole time, Angela Hill, she has the leg kick, she has the volume, and she does have the cardio to go 3 hard rounds. So for me, And I know we like to give a good account on both fighters, but...
Oh, I will.
Oh, good. It's just for me, I'm having a hard time finding where Ashley Yoder's going to win this fight against Hill.
For Ashley Yoder, you look at the losses, and I think they're incredibly telling. So if you go all the way back to 2016 on The Ultimate Fighter, she beats Jodie Esquibel, boxer. She loses to Kate Jackson, eventual title challenger with Bellator, big Kate Jackson guy. She beats Amber Brown over in Invicta, and then she gets into the UFC. You lose to Justine Kish, you lose to Angela Hill, you use a split decision to Mackenzie Dern, and that was a pretty close fight. You beat Amanda Bobby Cooper, negative record. You beat Siri Kondo, didn't have a good run in the UFC. You lose a split decision to Randa Marcos, now we're talking. You lose to Lavinia Souza, hold her in very high regard. You beat Miranda Granger, still don't really know what I have. So, with Ashley Yoder, I will say this, and I always used to say it about Randa Marcos, and I always say it about Carlos Esparza. Always gaining something, always doing something in this strawweight division. You need to. Because if you stay stagnant at women's strawweight, you're not going to do anything. Look at Randa Marcos. She fights the same way she did when she came in. Again, I know I just defeated my point. She always adds just a little wrinkle, but she's always the same too. Like, she's always keeping her arms out there. She's going to wrestle. Maybe a leg kick here, maybe a little bit more of a jab, like just small things. We talked about Randa
too much already.
Ashley Yoder is always gaining something. Her ground game gets better. She adds a wrinkle into her striking. Angela Hill, pretty good takedown defense, pretty slippery on the mat. You can see her over on her Instagram. She's training her jiu-jitsu, and her striking second to none. Like, she's somebody that later on in life picked up Muay Thai to bring it into MMA, and outstruck a lifelong Muay Thai artist.
Here's the thing, though, and
who was small.
It's important to beat Loma Lookboonmee, and yes, we hype up that win a lot. Let's be honest, Loma Lookboonmee is not the best representation of Muay Thai in MMA.
Atomweight.
Yes, she is an atomweight, but still, I just think the fact that Angela Hill has shown the ability to beat specialists at what they specialize in, and that's the most important thing. Even Hill, I thought she outstruck Michelle Waterson for the majority of that fight, and Michelle Waterson is one of the better fighters in the division of hitting and then not getting hit herself. So if you're able to counter-strike someone like Angela Hill, if you're able to stand in the pocket with some really good strikers in the division, and you have good takedown defense, like, other than the Jessica Andrades of the world, who was able to just pick up Angela Hill, outstrike her, just dominate her, really, I don't see someone like Ashley Yoder being able to physically dominate Angela Hill, and I do think that's the thing for Hill. She's going to struggle against the fighters who have a physical strength advantage over her. If she ever does fight, I guess if Tatiana Suarez ever fights again, like, fighters like that will give her trouble, but if she is just able to stand on the outside, have really just a kickboxing fight, I know Yoder's a decent wrestler. She's just not a good enough wrestler, I think, to get Hill down consistently.
You look at Hill's losses, and again, you want to talk telling. Carlos Esparza on The Ultimate Fighter, Tisha Torres, Rose Namajunas, Jessica Andrade, Nina Ansaroff, Cast Iron, Courtney Casey, Randa Marcos, beats Jodie Esquibel, lose to Yan Xiaonan, lose to Gedalia, lose to Waterson. Waterson's been at the top of the heap. Gedalia's been at the top of the heap. Yan Xiaonan's the next big thing. Randa Marcos back in 2019. You beat Jodie Esquibel. Doesn't tell me anything. They both have wins over Jodie Esquibel. Sure. Doesn't tell me much. Good boxer. Keith Jardine. Where you at? Beat Carnelossi. Beat Cyphers. Beat Lookboonmee. The wins are kind of tough, so you got to beat Ashley Yoder and vice versa. You got to beat Angela Hill to even get close to cracking the top 15. You lose this fight, you're in a bad spot. Oh. So we will update the odds here. Angela Hill opened a minus 360 favorite on best fight odds. She's now minus 372. And for Ashley Yoder, coming in the heavy underdog, if you can call it that, plus 295, now at a plus 287. A little bit of money coming in on Ashley Yoder in this rematch. Tapology votes, 933 of them, 90% going with Hill. 87% by decision. Now, I know we tried to be as nice as we can. We tried to do the Amanda Nunes, Megan Anderson type breakdown. But all I can say, if I'm going to be humble and kind, Angela Hill.
Yeah, Angela Hill just does everything quite a bit better than Ashley Yoder, and she should be fighting Tisha Torres this weekend. That's the matchup that they probably should have gone with. I understand Torres would rather wait and not fight anyone, I guess, but good on Angela Hill for, I guess, giving Yoder this opportunity, if you want to put it that way.
Yikes.
Good on her for just staying active, though. It's nice to see good fighters stay active. Angela Hill should win this without much controversy.
Matt, both of us going with Angela Hill to get the win. Really looking forward to this weekend's card. We have Cirkunov, Spann. We have Edwards taking on Belal Muhammad in the main events. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Straight up, my favorite fight on this entire card. We have Dan Ige, Dynamite Dan, taking on the Governor, Gavin Tucker. Matt, for a couple of guys from the East Coast of Canada, let's go! Here we go. Big fight for Gavin Tucker. Finally, this is one of Joe Rogan's favorite fighters next to Uroš Medic. And Gavin Tucker, Matt, I mean, we were in attendance. UFC Halifax, 2017. Derek Lewis, Well, I'd say he finished Travis Brown's career, but he kind of led to the demise of Mario Yamasaki as well. But the big winner of that night, Gavin Tucker beating the absolute brakes off Sam Sicilia. Listen, it was a Dominic Cruz-esque type of performance. It put Gavin Tucker on the map, so much so that when Gavin Tucker would fight subsequently, especially with the big pay-per-views, and I'm talking UFC 215, Joe Rogan was all over it. I mean, you had Tucker taking on the former World Series vet, Rick Glenn, and Rick Glenn boxed Gavin Tucker's face in.
It was one of those classic, I liken it a little bit to when Tim Means fought Sabah Homasi. And Sabah Homasi has all this hype behind him, and they're like, great, you're going to fight Tim Means. He's a little bit older now. You're probably not going to win. He's good technically, though. And then Tim Means is like, what did you just say? You think you're going to bring this young kid in to beat me? And Tim Means boxes that poor guy's ears in and TKOs him. Now, the difference was Gavin Tucker was too tough for his own good in that fight, and it should have been a stoppage, probably in the second round at some point. Because here's the thing. Tucker gets off to a great start. He wins the first, I'd say 4 minutes of the first round of that fight. He's using his great movement. But the problem for Tucker is in that fight, he was trying to knock Rick Glenn out, and he was throwing a lot behind his shots. And Gavin Tucker is not a knockout artist whatsoever. He's got great volume, he has very good technical striking, but he's not a fighter who should go out there looking for the knockout. If it presents itself, great, it might. He has great technique, like we said, but he's not someone who can go out there and just take your head off with one shot, a la Jeremy Stevens. That's what he tried to do against Rick Glenn, and you could tell he got tired so fast in that fight. And for Tucker, his cardio is normally such an asset that he can almost weaponize it against his opponents. We saw it against Seungwoo Choi in his next fight. We even saw it to a lesser degree against Justin James, where he can just go out there and he fights with such a hectic pace that he can break down his opponents with it.
And in the Billy Q fight, I mean, Gavin kept looking good in that fight. The thing that I loved, you can go back, I'm going to find the highlight on Twitter and I'll drop it somewhere, but there's one spot where he dips to his left, 1, 2, 3, and then he's out on his right, and he's totally out of space, and he does such a good job of moving in and out, of really going away from that lead hand, because, I mean, really, for Gavin Tucker, you're not taking on a lot of fellow southpaws. And the other thing that he has, very sneaky wrestling. He's a decent defensive wrestler, pretty good offensive wrestling, really good jiu-jitsu. And that's the thing, I mean, a guy fighting out of Titans MMA out of Bears Lake in Nova Scotia, you know, you're driving by on the highway, there's Costco, there's the IMAX, what else is there? There's Cardabon, the indoor go-kart track.
Yeah.
And then there's Titans MMA. And listen, you might think of the Maritimes, us slower people here in Canada. We never adjust like the rest of Canada does. And then you go down to Halifax. Chris Kalades. You've got, what? The man himself, Gavin Tucker. What about the best fighter that we've had of the Maritimes, Matt? That's from Halifax
TJ Grant.
TJ Grant. So Gavin Tucker, kind of the second coming. Now, I have to say all of that to start this because I don't want to give it a homer vibe. I picked against Gavin Tucker in a number of fights. I'll admit it. Like Drake would say. More Canadian vibes. But I look at this fight. Dan Ige the type of guy. He came into the UFC and lost his debut. I was actually in attendance for both of these guys' debuts. I was at UFC 220 and I saw Dan Ige lose to Julio Arce. And I've said since then, and I'll say it again, I'd love to see those guys fight every day. I'd love to see him fight every Saturday. It was a great fight when it happened.
Ige's a lot better now.
But for Dan Ige, since then, win over Mike Santiago, you beat Jordan Griffin, you beat Danny Henry, you beat Kevin Aguilar, you outdo Mirsad Bektic, you beat Edson Barboza, and then you lose, well, handily to Calvin Kattar. He's originally supposed to be taking on Ryan Hall in this spot. Hall out, Tucker in. So for me, Dan Ige had that huge win streak. 6 fights in a row against good competition. I don't think he beat Edson Barboza. I watched that on my phone out in the woods when I was camping. That's dedication. But I did. And, you know, I really didn't think Ige won that fight. But I look at all of these wins. Even if you're beating Mirsad Bektic by split, that's all right. You're winning these fights. You beat Kevin Aguilar, wrestler. You beat Danny Henry. Listen, Danny Henry's not what we expected after the Hakeem Dawodu fight, Canadian. But that's a pretty good win to have. Dan Ige, very, very consistent. Dan Ige is the most classic extreme couture fighter. And Gavin Tucker's already fought one of those guys in Justin James. So this will be a really interesting fight. I think Dan Ige has a little bit more in terms of hand speed and volume than James does. But Dan Ige's got that kind of same ilk, or he's cut from the same cloth as Gavin Tucker, because Ige doesn't really go away.
No, he doesn't. He's a guy who will be in your face for all 5 rounds, and that's the crazy thing. Dan Ige's a member of the 5-round club, and that cannot be understated, because if you go 5 rounds with a guy like Calvin Kattar, who's always going to be there, throws a lot of volume and has a lot of power, that really proves something about yourself. Now, I do have to say this about Dane Ige. I truly think he's the most beatable fighter in the top 15 of featherweight right now, because you look at his 2 best wins, it is a split decision over Mirsad Bektic, and I thought he won that fight, don't get me wrong. I did think Dane Ige beat him, but it was a fairly close fight, and I didn't think he won against Edson Barbosa at all. I thought that's one of the worst decisions I've ever seen in MMA. I really did. Edson completely outstrikes him. Yes, Dane Ige was able to get Edson to the mat a couple times in that fight, but when it's on the feet, Dane Ige struggles with those top tier strikers. He's a good striker himself, but the fact that A, he doesn't really throw any kicks, and B, he doesn't have crippling power by any means. He can hurt you with his hands, but it's more of a knockdown kind of a power than he has knockout power. And against someone like Gavin Tucker, we've seen his chin get checked before. Rick Glenn put it on him. Justin James was able to drop him.
Sungwoo Choi even had moments.
Sungwoo Choi, exactly. Even Sungwoo Choi had moments against him. These guys are both going to struggle against the top tier strikers in the UFC. But the great thing about it is these are MMA fights. These aren't just kickboxing fights. And that's what makes this so fun. They are both so well rounded that it will be interesting to see who goes for the first takedown. And really, that's what I'm going to be looking for. Because if Gavin Tucker's shooting on Dane Ige, that means that there's something in the striking that Gavin Tucker is not feeling comfortable with. And for Dane Ige, if he's the one shooting on Gavin Tucker, I think he'll have the higher likelihood for getting Tucker to the mat. The defensive wrestling of Dane Ige is phenomenal, and I don't know if someone like Tucker can get him to the ground unless he does time it off of strikes in some capacity. For Dane Ige, I think this is a case, and we kind of talked about this from Sean Brady fought Jake Matheus. These are 2 guys who are really good at everything. I just think Dane Ige might be slightly better at a few different areas than Gavin Tucker.
And I mean, you look at it for Dane Ige, he's got a judo background, he's a former collegiate wrestler, he's got jiu-jitsu in his back pocket. For Gavin Tucker, again, maybe the pedigree's in there for the wrestling. His jiu-jitsu is very good, Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, but it's just weird. I mean, Gavin Tucker kind of almost came out of nowhere on this Halifax card. Oh, it's a guy from Newfoundland that trains out of Halifax. Let's put him on a main card of a fight night and see what happens in his debut. And then he just continues along, and it's almost like he's a folk hero. He's got the wacky tattoos. I mean, everybody seems to like him. He wears a little fisherman's cap. Like, Gavin Tucker, people like him. People like him in the States. People like him all over the place.
He's got the it factor.
He's got the it factor. So for me, if we look at the Topology votes, 969 of them, 69% on Ige. For both these guys, majority of the fans think it's going to go by decision. If we look at the odds, Matt, Ige opened minus 145, minus 143 right now, but the line dropped on Tucker early. It's coming back on Ige now. Tucker plus 125 now to plus 118. Again, the money's kind of coming in on Ige right now. For me, Ige's taken on the tougher level of competition. The other thing that I think plays a little bit of a part in this one, Ige was getting ready for Ryan Hall. Gavin Tucker was getting ready for Cub Swanson. So, very different change of opponents for both of these guys in this one.
It really is, but I think we're going to get the best version of whatever fights we were supposed to be promised in the first place. Now Cub Swanson's fighting Giga Chikadze. That fight's insane. And now Gavin Tucker's just fighting, I'm not going to say a better version of himself, but just a very similar fighter to what he already is. And here's the thing. If Gavin Tucker ever wants to get in the top 15 of 145, and I'm assuming that's his goal, this is his best chance to do it. I just look at the other guys who are ranked in the top 15. You got guys like Sadiq Youssef, like Edson Barbosa, like Calvin Kattar,
like Arnold Allen.
Even Arnold Allen, who can defend all of your takedowns and then threaten you with not only power but volume. So I'm going to pick Dane Ige in this fight, but if Gavin Tucker is getting into the top 15, Dane Ige is going to be his ticket.
Let's go Canada, Matt. Going with Gavin Tucker. And listen, the reason why I like Tucker, it's the lateral movement and the scrambles. Dane Ige is great in all of the same positions, and I really do liken it, like you said, to the Jake Matheus fight against Sean Brady. Matheus had success in the first round with the striking. Second, third round, all Brady. I think that could play out a lot like this, or this could play out a lot like that, rather. But I do like the striking of Gavin Tucker in this one. I like the fact that, listen, we fought one guy. Now, this could play into Ige's hands. I fought a guy in Justin James that trains with Dane Ige. Listen, Ige's already trained
a much better version of
with James to get ready for it. So we'll see how it plays out. But again, the takedown defense of Tucker a little bit more porous, but he can threaten with more submissions than we've seen Dane Ige go for. So I do like Tucker in this fight. I'm really excited for this one. This should be such a good fight. We've got 3 Canadians on the card. Tucker, Jourdain, and Misha Cirkunov. I love it. I'm going Tucker. You're going Ige. Really looking forward to the card. So you're going to have to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Listen, Matt, COVID spring break is right around the corner. And you know what that means? Spring break in your pants. Manscaped is here to ensure the party in your pants never stops. Even Veronica Corningstone wouldn't say no to this pants party. My wife might. For everyone preparing for a pants party this spring break, I have an exclusive 20% off discount. Use code FMP at manscaped.com. Matt, we've all been there. We've been watching a lot of pop and popcorn fights. We pull down the drawers and we realize, holy smokes, that bush ain't high and tight. And Craig's been talking about it for months on end now. I better check it out, manscaped.com. Use that promo code FMP because you know what? If you check it out, you get the Perfect Package 3.0 kit. It comes with the essential Lawnmower 3.0. Ta-da. Look at that. That battery life. Honestly, not a lie, I haven't charged this since I got it. And that's been what? 2.5 months or so?
It's been a while.
I've been shaving my nuts with it. Matt's been handling my nut shaver. But B, I mean, it hardly ever runs out. It has a really long battery life. It's waterproof as well. It's a cordless body trimmer. And they have a ton of liquid formulations to round out your grooming routine. If I check off screen, boom, I've got the Crop Reviver Ball Toner. Little spritz, put that stuff on, you're going to have a good day. I've got the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorants. It's like a salve. You just slap that stuff on. I slap my hand way too hard. But you slap that stuff on and it works wonders. And they also have, now this isn't in the perfect package, but you get the Manscaped Refined Cologne. Now, Matt.
Hit him with it.
I love this stuff because I'm the type of guy, I've always been a cologne guy, but it's got to be not too strong. That's the trouble, right? You can't go into an office situation with really gross cologne, but you go, look at that. I'm going to blow it out so I don't waft it into my mouth.
Quite lovely.
But it does smell very good. Now, the trimmer, it's the best in the business. There's a ceramic cutting edge to reduce ball grooming accidents. And again, for the shower groomers like myself, like yourself, it works good. You can tidy up afterwards. You don't want to ruin any vibes of spring break or upcoming summer with some peaking pubes coming out of your swimsuit. So be sure to use the Crop Cleanser body wash that they have as well. Your hair and skin are going to feel healthy and fresh. And like I said, I mean, inside that perfect package, all sorts of great concoctions that they have. You want to make spring break the best, you're going to make sure that you check out manscaped.com. And for right now as well, if you subscribe, you get 2 free gifts. The Shed Travel Bag, $39 value.
Wow.
$39 value. Listen, you need a nice toiletry bag. I do as well, and I'm getting ready. Listen. Maybe there's going to be some traveling sometime soon. Hopefully. I'm going to be carrying this sucker around with me. When you see me at live events for MMA, I'm going to have the Shed somewhere close to me. They also have the great patented high-performance reduced chafing Manscaped boxers. So get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the promo code FMP. Do yourself a favor and always use the right tools for the job. And Matt, I'm going to round it out with this. Listen, they've got this handy little weed whacker. You see me do this week in and week out. It needs to happen.
It works, guys. It works.
You can hear that. If you didn't hear that in the mic, listen, I'm going to shave my nose here. So, manscaped.com, they've been a great partner to the show. A lot of people have checked it out. And listen, there's positive reviews every week in the comments section with this stuff. So, again, manscaped.com, promo code FNP, 20% off and free shipping. We thank you for checking out Manscaped. And listen, say hello, aloha to your new beautiful balls with Manscaped. What an awesome fight we have in our co-main event of the evening at light heavyweight. Misha Cirkunov taking on Superman Ryan Spann. Matt, for Ryan Spann, he was a guy that was on Contender Series, and he lost emphatically. And then he continued to win, and he made it to the UFC, and then he continued to win until he lost his last fight to Johnny Walker. Something both of these guys have in common, well, losing emphatically to Johnny Walker. And if you look at it for Misha Cirkunov, the guy is 2-3 in the 5 on in. You look at some of the losses, well, they're by a finish, but we're talking Glover Teixeira. We're talking Johnny Walker. We're talking, no time, Volkan Oezdemir. And for Misha Cirkunov, it's kill or be killed. And if we're killing, we're submitting.
Oh, yeah. People like saying the ground is water and he's a shark. That's what Cirkunov is. He's an absolute shark when it comes to grappling. And the way in which he can get his opponents to the ground is really impressive. He does have good judo. He has good wrestling. But he's one of these guys who is just so physically strong that he can kind of muscle his way into some positions. Now, I'm not saying that is the best path to victory if you're trying to beat a guy like a Jan Blachowicz, let's say, for the title. Because he's going to tire you out, TKO you. But against someone like Ryan Spann, It's just a tough fight for Ryan Spann, because you look at what Ryan Spann excels at. It's a lot of the same things that Misha Cirkunov does. The issue is he's not as good at Misha in grappling. I look at the wrestling of Ryan Spann. Is he a good wrestler? He is, and he's a good defensive wrestler as well. He just isn't as good at wrestling as Misha Cirkunov. And the same thing, I look towards the jiu-jitsu. Ryan Spann has decent jiu-jitsu, but a lot of his submissions are A, defensive submissions, or B, they're after he hurts his opponent with a shot, and then he can try to search for submission after that. I don't really see him getting that opportunity against a guy like Misha Cirkunov, and maybe I'm giving my hand a little bit too early in this fight, but I'm pretty confident about Misha Cirkunov in this fight. I love his top pressure against a guy like Ryan Spann. Just, this is one of those fights where maybe Ryan Spann could catch him, but stylistically, this is a hard fight for Ryan Spann. He has the grappling defense to at least survive minutes, maybe even rounds in this fight. But I just think as the fight progresses, there's just going to be a lot of Misha Cirkunov top control, fishing for different submissions as the rounds go on. And eventually, I think he'll be able to find something.
The funny thing is, I remember, like, down to a T, Ryan Spann's last fight. So he fought back in September against Johnny Walker. I remember doing the breakdown clear as day. I said, hey, Ryan Spann, what does he do well? All right, striker, awful cardio, his wrestling's decent, but don't do what you did against Carl Roberson and go for that deep double leg. You're going to get elbowed and knocked out. He did exactly that and get finished the exact same way by Johnny Walker. So for Ryan Spann, it's weird. Like, you look at the UFC record overall. He fights Emiliano Sordi a second time on Dana White's Contender Series in 2018. He wins that one by guillotine in the first round quick. He fights Luis Enrique, and he gets taken down. Is Luis Enrique the best grappler, the best wrestler? No. So then he fights Little Nog, and he knocks him out in Brazil.
After Little Nog rocks him, though, that's a little concerning.
But he knocks him out, big win. He submits Devin Clark. Well, if you submit Devin Clark, you're on your way to the top 15. He fights Sam Alvey and beats Sam Alvey, but I put my hands up. I honestly thought Smiling Sam won that fight. And it was such a disappointing fight.
Yeah, it was just a classic example of Ryan Spann beats up Sam Alvey for about half a round, and then you can tell Ryan Spann's cardio starts to become a factor, and he does get tired as that fight progresses. And it's not like Sam Alvey's some, ridiculous volume striker by any means, but Sam Alvey worked his way back into that fight just by moving forwards pretty much. And the fact that Ryan Spann is so happy to be on the back foot in a lot of his fights is really concerning against a guy like Cirkunov, who, if he is the one pushing forward, can easily just punch into a double leg takedown up against the cage, work, and keep on trying to get on top of you. Because the great thing Cirkunov does, we see a lot from Dagestani wrestlers, is he breaks your base. Every time you try to get back up to your feet, he's really good at figuring out what you're using to balance and then taking that away from you. If you're trying to post with an arm, he's going to take that away from you. And every single read you give him, I'm going to liken it to a Petr Yan on the feet, where he's always learning about what his opponent's doing. Well, Misha Cirkunov's that same way in the grappling. He's going to figure out how you like your transitions, how you're moving on the ground, and he's going to start capitalizing on all your mistakes.
And listen, I mean, Spann, we talk about the gas tank as being an issue. It's not like Misha Cirkunov, some type of cardio king. I mean, you look at his UFC career. He beats Daniel Jolly in the first round, Alex Nicholson in the second round, Iwan Kutsilaba third round, Krylov first round, loses in the first round, Cummins in the first round. He beats him, loses to Walker in the first round, beats Jimmy Crute in the first round. Misha Cirkunov's fights don't go that long.
He does not get paid by the hour.
You better hope this fight ends in the first round. It was originally supposed to take place back in December, and that's the other thing. Misha Cirkunov's last fight was against Jimmy Crute back in September of 2019. It's a long layoff for Cirkunov. He was injured back in December. He's the guy that came over to Canada from Latvia at the age of 12. And when he came over to jolly old Canada, he got into judo to try and kind of make some friends and acclimatize himself. Awesome stuff from Cirkunov, a guy who has great throws. He has great just basic wrestling too. And you watch those slick transitions. You want to go back and watch the Jimmy Crute fight. Crute has Cirkunov in all kinds of bad spots in that fight, and vice versa, but there's a spot where Crute's on top just hammering away. The referee's giving it a good look, and Misha just kind of powers out of it, gets him into a bad spot, rolls, and then gets him into the Peruvian necktie, and it was game over for Jimmy Crute, who is a very, very good wrestler and a very, very good grappler. So I love the fight. I think it's a great one. The odds here, Cirkunov minus 125, now minus 124. The odds haven't really changed. For Spann, open to plus 105. He's now plus 100. So listen, the money's kind of moved around a little bit. You want to have a look at the Tapology votes to see what the fans are thinking. They're very close. 51% Spann, a large contingent. 81% have him by knockout. The 49% have Cirkunov, 69% by submission. That's out of 974 total votes. So I'm in agreement with you. Again, you tipped your hand. I like Cirkunov in this one. It is Spann by knockout, Cirkunov by submission. Or maybe Spann clips Cirkunov and submits him, but I really don't see it. I just have Cirkunov. I think his wrestling's good enough, unless he gets caught by a straight shot up the middle. I think he's going to go in there and get the submission win.
If Spann had like 15% more power, I'd be a lot more confident picking him. He does have TKOs on his record. He's not that great of a striker, though. You're not looking for Ryan Spann to go out there and strike like a guy who is like Carl Roberson, for instance. He's very technical. Spann does need to catch him with kind of a looping wild shot, and I think Cirkunov's too smart to get caught by something like that. I see a submission win for him as well.
Yikes. Both of us going with Latvia and Canada's Misha Cirkunov to get the win. Really looking forward to this fight and our main event, Matt. Leon Edwards finally making the walk, taking on Belal Muhammad. Remember the name. It should be a great fight, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big time welterweight main event. We finally have the return of Leon Edwards making his first appearance in the octagon since July 20th of 2019. It's just been fights that have fallen out. Woodley, Chimaev, and now he gets a short notice draw. We have the third ranked welterweight in Leon Edwards at this moment, taking on number 13, Belal Muhammad. And Matt, it's a great matchup. It's an awesome one on short notice because both guys do a lot of the same things very well. And we saw it from Belal Muhammad his last time out against Diego Lima. This guy's not just a wet blanket. He is with his pressure, but holy smokes, Belal Muhammad's hands just a few weeks ago against Diego Lima, it was like a totally different fighter out there.
Belal Muhammad's a fighter who has always improved fight in, fight out. And it's something that's really admirable because he doesn't always wait for a loss and then he tries to change his style. Every single time you see Belal Muhammad, you are seeing a better version of him. And I go back to the Lyman Good fight. That's always a great example because Lyman Good, you know how much power he has. You know he's a decent defensive wrestler. Belal Muhammad outstruck Good, and that was the first kind of sign that, wow, Belal Muhammad, he is starting to grow his striking repertoire. He's not just a guy who's going to strike his way into the clinch and then work for the takedown. He's more than happy to throw combinations on the feet, and against a guy like Good, who, yes, has big power, but he doesn't always have the volume to match his power, you can outstrike him, and you can win rounds by striking with a guy like Lyman Good. And then, like you had said, his last fight against Lima, we really showed that Belal Muhammad has to be taken seriously on the feet now. No, he's not a power puncher by any means. I wouldn't say he's a striker like a Vicente Luque who can go out there, really chop your front leg and then knock you out with an overhand. But he has crisp combinations. He has really good cardio too. And that's another important factor for this fight. Normally when you have a guy coming in on short notice in a 5-round atmosphere, you have to worry about them after the first round, after the second round. I'm not concerned at all about Belal Muhammad's cardio in this round. If this goes into the 5th round and both guys are throwing a lot, Belal Muhammad's still going to be there. He's not going to tire in that 4th. Kind of like we saw with Aljamain Sterling where he's got this crazy high work rate and then he starts to get tired. Belal Muhammad can keep that up. And I have no doubt in my mind that he is going to be in shape and ready for this fight. And the good thing for Muhammad is it's on short notice, but it's not like it's only 2 weeks. This fight has been announced for a little while now, so hopefully we do get the best version of Belal Muhammad showing up against Leon Edwards. And to be quite honest, he's going to need the best version of himself against Leon Edwards because Leon Edwards, listen, he was supposed to, well, he fights RDA, beats the absolute brakes off RDA. He's supposed to fight Tyron Woodley, which was the opportunity that was eventually given to Gilbert Burns. I feel very comfortable sitting here saying that Leon Edwards would be able to beat Tyron Woodley. That might be a bit of a hot take. Maybe he couldn't beat early 2020 Tyron Woodley, but I'm very confident Leon Edwards would beat Tyron Woodley. The Chimaev fight, there's so many question marks around Chimaev. Who really knows what would have happened in that fight? But I know Leon Edwards is at the top of the division. I've seen what he's been able to do to Rafael dos Anjos, who might not be an elite welterweight, but as a skill set, RDA does everything well. He's got really good cardio, he's got good striking, good defense, or good defensive wrestling, good offensive wrestling, and really good jiu-jitsu. Leon Edwards beat him in every single facet of MMA. He beat him up on the feet, he took RDA down, he controlled him on the ground. RDA doesn't fight exactly like Belal Muhammad does, but he does bring a lot of the same tools to the table that Muhammad does, and I'm having a hard time seeing what Muhammad will be able to do to Leon Edwards that RDA wasn't. Do I think Muhammad will be able to get a takedown? I'm sure at some point in this fight he will be able to get one. I just think the defensive wrestling of Leon Edwards, along with his ability to get back up to his feet, is really going to give Belal trouble in this fight.
I mean, Matt, the real narrative going into this one should be, it's not somebody's 0 has to go. It's somebody's 18-3 has to go. And in a fight like this, again, you talk about Leon Edwards on such a win streak since losing to Kamaru Usman back in December of 2015. Wins over Dominic Waters, Albert Tumanov by finish. That's important. Vicente Luque, Brian Barberena, bam, bam. He beat Peter Sabata. He beat Donald Cerrone in 2018. When a win against Donald Cerrone meant a lot more than it did in 2019
was the main event.
19 or 2020. He beat Gunnar Nelson by split. He beat Dos Anjos. In that Gunnar Nelson fight, that's when in my mind I made there was a switch that flipped for me and Leon Edwards. because he out-wrestled Gunnar Nelson and he beat him on the ground. And I never thought that would have been possible in a fight against Nelson. Now listen, Nelson never looked the same since what? Pick your fight?
There's been a few. Santiago Ponzinibbio took his soul.
But yeah, in a fight like that, I thought Leon Edwards looked great, and then Edwards looked very, very good against Dos Anjos. For me, with Belal Muhammad, you look at some of the losses. Jeff Neal, gonna happen. Highly technical striker. You get finished by Vicente Luque, any punch from Luque can knock you out. You lose to Jourdain in 2016, your UFC debut. It's gonna happen. The wins, good wins. You beat Randy Brown, I like it. Randy Brown, underrated wrestler, underrated grappling. You beat Jordan Meehan. What does Jordan Meehan do?
Everything.
He does the old Canadian standoff. He just gets in your face and makes it mean. He beat Tim Means by split. You beat Chance Rencounter. That was a great win. He beat Curtis Millender. Frustrated him. Millender, Bellator's own. He beat Takashi Sato, but he mopped the floor with Takashi Sato in that fight. That was a good win. The Lyman Good fight, he just never went away. Lyman Good needs space to do a lot of stuff. Didn't give him that space. Didn't give space to Diego Lima, and you talked about it. Maybe Belal Muhammad's not going to knock somebody out. He came so close to finishing Diego Lima. He threw the kitchen sink at him. Lima's got a chin.
Oh, Lima really does. So does his brother. Now, here's the thing. Diego Lima is not Douglas Lima, and outstriking Diego Lima, it's impressive for someone who is primarily a wrestler, but it doesn't show me that, wow, you're finally an elite striker. Like, if Vicente Luque fought Diego Lima, he would TKO him in 30 seconds. Like, just Diego Lima, to outstrike him when we don't look at you as a striker is impressive, but I don't think just outstriking Diego Lima is the most impressive thing a person can do. And when I look towards Leon Edwards, Belal Muhammad is going to have to make this an MMA fight. Very similar to what Jan Blachowicz did against Israel Adesanya. And Leon Edwards is very well-rounded, but he is such a good striker that he is happy to keep things on the feet and stand at range. Muhammad's going to need takedown attempts in this fight. And it's hard to say that because Leon Edwards himself is a very good grappler, very good defensive wrestler, very good wrestler himself. The thing that worries me about this is Belal Muhammad has to get close, and Leon Edwards has phenomenal elbows, and he's really good at using them to defend takedown attempts a la Travis Brown up and down, but he's also good in the clinch. We saw that in the Gunnar Nelson fight. I know that was a split decision, but he won every single round of that fight. And the great thing about Edwards was he dropped Gunnar Nelson with an elbow, with his lead elbow, which is something you don't often see.
Who is he, Paul Felder?
Exactly. It's just the weapons like that Leon Edwards has at the weird ranges, I do think is going to give Muhammad issues. And you look at the losses Muhammad has, Jeff Neal gets dropped twice. Loses to Luque, gets knocked out. Alan Jourdain gets dropped twice. Muhammad has a really good chin, but he can get dropped and he can get hurt. Leon Edwards is not the type of striker who you want to be, oh, I'll stand on the outside with him and maybe I can try to get him with my volume. I think Muhammad has to go for takedowns early. I think he has to get into the clinch early. But the issue with that is you're walking into range against one of the more athletic and one of the more technical and really accurate strikers in this division. So I think Muhammad will bring a very good fight, and I think we're going to learn something about Leon Edwards, be that cardio. Maybe we're going to learn how good his defensive wrestling is. But I just don't know how Muhammad's going to really be able to win consecutive rounds against a guy like Leon Edwards.
Leon Edwards has had all of this time, and even if you look back at his last three fights, Cerrone, Nelson, Dos Anjos. Let's kick out Cerrone. Nelson, he worked on his wrestling. Dos Anjos, he worked on his wrestling. And from July of 2019 until now, he's been booked against guys with great wrestling in Chimaev and Tyron Woodley. I have to think that is a huge hole that maybe early on we saw could be exposed for Leon Edwards. But if you look at him now, I mean, the guy's legs are absolutely shredded. So hopefully, A, knock wood, he makes weight. But B, he's so ready for a fight against a guy like Belal Muhammad. Muhammad went from Lima, primary striker, to this matchup. The funny thing is, Matt, we have a big enough sample size so we can look at it. Belal Muhammad actually beats Leon Edwards in a lot of statistical categories. Average fight time, less so, but he hasn't fought in the main events. He has a higher work rate in terms of strikes landed. In terms of striking accuracy, a little bit less. In terms of defense, a little bit more. More takedowns, averaged, a little bit less in terms of accuracy, higher defense. It's kind of funny.
It is, but this is a great example as to why stats don't really matter in MMA, let's be honest. Like, MMA is the only sport where you can really score a 50-point touchdown at the last second of the fight because, A, it makes no sense, and this is the weirdest sport in the world, but also, knockouts happen, and there's no rhyme or reason for them. Leon Edwards has such a striking advantage in this fight. I cannot emphasize it enough. Like, I think Belal Muhammad has turned himself into a good striker. Now he's fighting one of the elite strikers at 170. And it's not like he's fighting an elite striker at, like, 205, who, like, yeah, he's good, but the weight class is thin. Leon Edwards can outstrike pretty much anyone under 185 pounds. It's kind of wild. He's super technical. He's got great hand speed too. And the last thing for me from the striking of Edwards, he's got a great body kick. And the fact that Belal Muhammad, he does keep his hands very high when he strikes, that body's going to be open all day long. And if you've seen the pictures of Leon Edwards' legs, oh my goodness, he's been kicking something. It could be banana trees, I don't really know. But if he is able to start getting that kick off on the body of Belal Muhammad, who hasn't been in a 5-round atmosphere yet, I do think Leon Edwards can start investing in that early and really pull away as the fight goes on.
Maybe we get, Muay Thai, Bangkok ready type of Leon Edwards. I don't know. But the thing that worries me a little bit in this one too, and I have to throw it out there, Leon Edwards could go out there and lay an egg. We haven't seen him in a really long time. I don't expect it. But if Belal Muhammad's going to win, it's got to be pressure off the hop. It's got to be investing in the takedowns. And for himself, investing in the body. We didn't see a ton of it in the fight against Lima, but we did see a great job of him going up top, really landing very well. And if you want to talk in terms of all the striking numbers, 136 to 70 were the strikes for Muhammad. 0% of the leg kicks. He went 0 of 1 on leg kicks. 109 of 232 to the head and 20 to 31 to the body. So you did see a little bit of body work, but it was mainly Belal Muhammad going to the head, and Diego Lima's defense wasn't all that great in that fight. No. So we talk about the odds. Leon Edwards, minus 260 favorite at open, minus 271 right now. Best fight odds. If we look at Belal Muhammad, open to plus 200, now to plus 215. If we look at the Topology votes, yikes. Wow. 1,037 of them, 85% Edwards and 75% by decision. That's definitely the safe pick. And really the pick I would go with anyway. Belal Muhammad has more of an opportunity in this one. I think that maybe the odds might show. Maybe the fans might show. But Leon Edwards, holy smokes. He's taken on the highest level of competition. He's been training for 2 huge fights. Now listen, you made it this far. Chimaev in the background of the thumbnail. A little bit ominous. Maybe we get Chimaev someday. But this is a great fight. I have Leon Edwards in this one. I think he's going to be able to get it done. What a great boxer. What a great defensive wrestler. And if he has to wrestle himself, how interesting would that be?
Oh, because he's really good at it. That's the thing. He is one of the more well-rounded guys in the UFC. And I'm going to liken Leon Edwards to a quote that Steph Curry said. He said, when teams play the Golden State Warriors, they want to beat us. They remember what we did to them for the last 5-6 years. I think Leon Edwards wants a finish in this fight. He hasn't been in there in a while. He's not known as a terribly, heavy-handed striker by any means. He's fighting an opponent who has been dropped in the past by highly technical strikers, which is what Leon Edwards is. I would not be surprised if Leon Edwards goes out there looking to prove a point. I'm going to say a slightly overconfident pick. I'm going to say Leon Edwards by 3rd round TKO. I think eventually the power is going to get to Muhammad, and I do think the body work that he hopefully will invest in early will take away some of the cardio of Belal Muhammad, and I think Leon Edwards will TKO him in that 2nd or 3rd round.
Matt's got Edwards. I've got Edwards. What a great card, Matt. 3 fellow Canadians. We're taking you Misha Cirkunov. And listen, it's a great card overall. If you missed any of the videos, make sure you head back and watch them. We also have question mark kicks on Saturday, 2 hours before the prelims. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. Enjoy the week. We'll see you on Saturday. Matt, as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.